Good morning, everybody. I hope your week is starting off well. You know the best way to probably start your week off? Coffee. Yeah, I agree. You know the best type of coffee you can possibly get on planet Earth? That's right, Black Rifle Coffee. Where can you find it? BlackRifleCoffee.com is the best place. I'm looking at their webpage right now, and the first thing I'm seeing is your ability to join the coffee club. So instead of ordering multiple times, you can just put yourself on an ordering matrix for as many bags as you want, as often as you want. And then right next to that, they have their exclusive shirts. Actually, I'm clicking through right now, their other gear. And then just below that, all of the different blends of coffee that they make, from light to extra dark. They even have decaf on there, which is ridiculous. And if you drink decaf, well, you know, drink decaf if you want to. It's 2022, almost 2023, but I don't recommend it. Why do I like Black Rifle Coffee so much? One, I know the founders, and they're awesome people. And two, I love the fact that they are doing everything they can to support veterans, individuals, organizations, and businesses. So I think those are amazing things. And that's all I have to say about that. Enough on the business side of the house. My guest today is a man that I have known of since very, very early on in my jumping career. His name is Jeb Corliss, and he was off in the backcountry doing gnarly shit long before there were social media platforms of the modern era that would allow people to get or achieve notoriety in the way that many people do, by pushing the envelope for views and likes. Jeb Corliss is, I'm not going to say he's a madman, because he's not. I think he's actually totally sane. He is an absolute savage. Professional skydiver and base jumper. Jumped off a few notable objects, to say the least. Eiffel Tower in Paris, Space Needle in Seattle, the Christ the Redeemer statue in Rio de Janeiro, the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur, a bunch of jumps in China. I mean, in addition, those are some of the base jumps that he has done. He's been a skydiver, an accomplished skydiver for quite some time. He also likes to, swim with sharks. He's a professional GoPro athlete, stunt coordinator. You might have seen him for a little bit of a cameo in the newest Point Break movie. Needless to say, he has been jumping at what I'll call the front leading edge of what is possible for a very long time. And I couldn't have been happier to get the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation with him about who he is, why he does the things that he does, and what he's got planned for the future. Episode number 254 with Jeb Corliss. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
You ready to do this? After
ready.
months and months and months and months and months of texting?
Yeah, it's been back and forth quite a bit.
It has. We were just talking about how ridiculously safe base jumping is.
I think the only thing more dangerous than base jumping was your job before.
You know,
I would say military and war is probably the one thing that, depending on whose side you're on, is more dangerous than base jumping.
I mean, that actually would be an interesting comparison, because you'd have to look. I still can't figure out, and so my kind of mentor into base jumping was Miles Dasher,
Okay.
who,
Wonderful guy.
surprisingly enough, is sponsored by Red Bull, but needs no energy drinks of any kind.
Nope, he's the most high energy human being I've ever met, period.
I think they actually bring him down a notch. I'm not sure the chemical composure and how that works, but so he was my mentor into the sport, and I asked him, how many people do you think base jump? And it's just like wild conjecture. Nobody really knows. I mean, because I think I've actually even asked like Matt and Mike, because they make, they own Squirrel. It's like, how many?
They have the best idea for sure.
Well, that between them and probably Phoenix Fly and maybe Tony
And Apex.
And you added all that together, and so I mean, there's probably been. Average SEAL community is going to be afloat at 2,500, but people leave and come out. I think the numbers might be relative.
Similar.
Depending on the year.
Now especially.
Yeah.
Back in the early, like when we started, it wasn't that many.
Well, when you started. I started much after you did. Trust me, I was watching videos of you long before I started.
Well, and it also kind of depends on what you consider a base jumper, right? Is a base jumper a person who jumps off bridges? You know, or is it a person who does all 4 objects? Is it a person who does 100 jumps a year, 1,000? You know, how many? What makes you a base jumper? What makes a person active? Right?
Is there an answer to this question?
And there isn't. It's all it's made up, and that's why it's very difficult to really judge. Right?
Yeah.
But I would say you're probably accurate. I'd say now with how popular the sport's become, I would say there's probably 2,500 would be the guess of active base jumpers around the world.
That's what I would put it. People who are current, who are traveling.
Yeah.
They're doing probably
between 50 and 100 jumps a year.
Yeah, and they're hitting the Perrine, and then they're going somewhere else. And I'd have to, on any given year, there are some years that are catastrophic in the military, but now that kinetic operations have kind of toned down.
Yeah.
There's some years where base jumping, the fatalities exceed military, especially in the conduct of war, substantially. Because we were talking about you had just gotten back from Europe, and it used to be 20% of the time you'd go over there and somebody would die, and now 80%. And so Miles was great. I met him. Fucking, you might know her too, Bonnie. She used to own the gear shop or Skydive San Diego.
I know the name, don't know her, but I know the name.
And I was jumping in San Diego because I lived there. I had remembered some random conversation that she knew Miles. I was like, listen, I need to get a hold of Miles. And she tosses me some Miles at Hotmail shit.
Okay.
I'm like, fuck it, I'm going to reach out. He gets back to me. I'm like, son of a bitch. And we meet each other at the parking lot before there was the new visitor center at the bridge. So he comes sauntering up. I knew it was him because he had a Red Bull hat on slightly askew, which is how Miles rolls.
Yep.
And he was great. We went the bridge multiple times, and he mentored me through my first trip to Europe, Italy first.
He was a great person to learn from. One of the most experienced jumpers on the planet.
He was the most at the time.
I think he still is. As far as numbers, he's got the most jumps.
I think he's been passed, actually.
Shuma probably passed him,
Sean
but
Shuma.
you can't, that's hard because they're both,
Just because Shuma does 40 jumps a day off that bridge and can hike it in several minutes.
Yeah.
But when I went over that first trip, we did Monte Brento. Excellent place to start.
Beautiful.
Slick, and then first wingsuit jumps, and then we went to Lauterbrunnen. I think first we did Yellow Ocean, then the Lola Moose, and then started working our way over to the Via Ferrata, and eventually, I'd gone there with a few times. But the first trip, we were in the valley. It was amazing. My family was actually there. 0 fatalities.
Wow. That's rare.
Indeed. Well, and also I was only there for 9 days.
Okay.
So for the season, I'm sure there were fatalities. But when I was there, in my personal experience, it's this is fucking awesome. Everybody does this.
Everyone's having fun. Wow. Sunshine and rainbows. Isn't this awesome?
We all meet at the Horner Pub afterwards, and then we get bratwurst, and then we have an espresso. Yeah. And then I went back a second time. I was there with my buddy Alex, and I swear to God, there was somebody going in every fucking day. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, and we would be, we would go jump High Lamoose, and somebody would go in off High Ultimate.
Yeah.
We would go to the other side, and we would jump Via Ferrata, and somebody would fucking go in.
Yeah.
And it's just
That was 2016. That was, I think, the bad year.
It was.
Almost 40 fatalities.
Holy.
And there was 10 days with a death every single day for 10 days straight.
I was there during that time, and so the helicopter, right? You'd be hiking, and you'd see, and you're like, okay, let's balance these two experiences and exposure. I think it's very easy from my own experience. I've always tried to be very cognizant of the risk. Not that I'm perfect in that, but I have watched people lose sight and get wrapped up in the fun and excitement and the footage, as opposed to what's actually happening. And man,
well, I think it's a phenomenon in the sport that, it's always kind of been this way, where it draws in a very specific type of mindset, like a specific type of person who's they like to take risks. That's just it. No one gets into base jumping thinking it's safe. No one. Really, no one thinks base jumping is safe.
However, the justifications for the safety are interesting.
Well, but there are people who think. And this is happening more and more. As I'm meeting more and more people who are diluting themselves. Yep. They get into this strange delusion that if they buy brand new gear, if they do the proper training, do the right amount of jumps, and just if I'm really careful, I can do this safely. And that's just not true. And they are deluding themselves. I think the reality of base jumping is there is no word. You can't use the word safe anywhere in the sport. Period. There's nothing safe about it on any level. Period. I think there's 3 levels of base jumping. There's dangerous, there's really dangerous, and then there's stupid fucking dangerous. Right? And those are the 3 levels of what base jumping is. And you can do things like proper training, proper equipment, being current, doing the proper progression, you can tilt odds into your favor, right? You can give yourself the best chance for success, right? But it's one of the few activities I've been part of where you can do everything right, make no real mistakes,
and still die.
And that is and it's funny because base jumpers, whenever someone dies, they have to come up with a reason. They get into these arguments, and there has to be a reason, and they have to try to understand that reason so that they can somehow in themselves go, okay, he made a mistake, and I'm not going to make that mistake.
Yep.
But what they don't realize is that, and this is, I'm talking about guys who've been in it for at least a decade and who've been like doing this for a decade. Every one of them have already made those mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's what it's hard. Like, it's funny to see it too. Like I see these guys and they start talking about like what they did wrong. And it's like, dude, you realize you've done that too. The difference between them and you is you got lucky and they didn't. And lucky, I don't see it as a force, right? It's not a thing that does things. It's a description. You're describing something that should have gone a different way. And the odds were against you and it just worked out. That's luck, right? You got lucky because it shouldn't have worked out for you, but it did. And in base jumping, that happens a lot to all of us. And I think what people don't grasp about the sport is it has incredibly small margins for error, like really tiny. You don't need to make big mistakes for really seriously bad things to happen to you. So you can make a little tiny mistake and it can have catastrophic consequences. And guess what? We're human beings. Human beings make mistakes. That's part of being human, and that's why I think base jumping is as dangerous and it is as lethal as it is because we're human beings. We make mistakes, and when you make mistakes in something like this, it's serious. It's super serious. But having said that,
you just got back from Europe.
Well, no, but that's what makes it powerful.
Yeah,
that's why people like. Again, it's a certain type of human being. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. When I meet someone and they tell me, oh, I want to get into base jumping, especially proximity flying, I want to get into being a proximity flyer, my first priority is to talk them out of it.
Yeah.
Like, my goal is to convince a person not to do this under any circumstance. Like, if you can avoid this, like, if you can find happiness in your life doing anything else,
follow it.
Do anything else. Literally do anything else with your life if you can find happiness. But there are a certain types of people who can't, right? They're wired in a kind of a different way where they need extreme experience in order to find happiness, in order to be happy, to be fulfilled, to have a purpose to exist, like a reason to live. Like it gives them, and you can see it. There are jumpers who this is their reason to live.
Yeah.
And if you're that kind of person, right? I'm totally cool with you doing dangerous stuff. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing dangerous things. I think it's totally okay. And actually, in many instances, that's how human beings evolve and grow and become something new and get strong, is by doing things that are risky and dangerous. That's what moves the species forward. And there's nothing wrong with it. As long as you don't delude yourself. Yeah. As long as you're being realistic. It doesn't take courage to do something that doesn't scare you, right? So if you're just fooling yourself into thinking this isn't dangerous or that you can somehow, you're the one, you got this magical ability to not die, right? You just are magic. Well, then I don't respect your death. I'm sorry. If you go into this thinking it's safe and you die, dude, you died like a sucker. That's not being smart. But if you accept the reality, you understand how dangerous it is, you accept the danger that's involved, and then you still do it, well, that takes courage. See, that's a person who you're facing your fear, you're growing mentally, and you're becoming stronger. And I personally think that optimists are foolish. Being an optimist is the wrong way to be in a sport that can kill you. Being a pessimist is also the wrong approach. There's only one proper approach. Be realistic.
Yeah.
You must be a realist. And if you can do that, if you can be realistic about what you're doing, what you're partaking in, and you accept the consequences, that's what this is all about, right? Accepting the consequences for your actions. If you're that person and you go out there knowing, okay, this, I've always been a little like kind of, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but a lot of jumpers don't like me because they think I'm negative. Like they're like, you're such a negative guy. You talk about the sport in such a negative way. And it's funny because I used to think I was different. Like I was abnormal in the way I approached the sport or my life, right? And I would go into base jumps anticipating death. like accepting it. Like I am. This is so lethal.
Like truly thinking through it.
No, yeah, it's true. I'm going to die right now. Like I'm doing this knowing it's going to equal death, right? And that's a unique way of looking at things. Most people don't do that, right?
Yeah.
That's not the approach. At least I didn't think they did. Like I thought that was a unique thing that I would go into it going, okay, I'm accepting the worst case scenario, and now I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. That was kind of my approach. And I thought for a long time, I'm like, I didn't hear other base jumpers talk like that, or I didn't really meet other base jumpers who approached it like that. And then later I started reading about samurai warriors and started reading about like Spartans, right? And their approach to going into combat. And what I started learning is that I'm not unique at all. There were entire cultures that was their entire approach. A samurai would go into battle accepting death, knowing I am going to die right now. And then what that did is it freed him from his fear of it, right? That acceptance allowed him to finally just let it go and then operate at optimum, at his optimum abilities to make sure that didn't happen. And it's a different approach. It's not a suicidal thought. It's the opposite.
Yeah, you're not saying I want to die.
Yeah, you're not saying you don't want to die.
You could just take the parachute off for that and still do the jump.
Exactly. Well, but that's the thing, right? It's so for me, it was like a mental. I realized later that what I was doing was a mental exercise.
Yeah.
Like it was my way of coping with fear, because that's really at the end of the day, that's what I do, right? I mean, my job is really dealing with gut-wrenching horror and trying to work my way through it. And I used that gut-wrenching horror to work through mental issues that I was dealing with, which is funny because you read my book, which is interesting. You're the first one to get it. Like you got it before I got it, which I thought
shit.
Yeah, you literally got one before I got one.
It was good, man.
Oh well, thank you.
I mean, it's based around memoirs from the edge, if you will. You look at it through the lens of skydiving, but we were kind of texting back and forth. You're covering a lot of deeper issues, like more of who you are, where you came from, and I think how you probably found yourself as a person.
Yeah.
And to me, reading that, I don't think anybody knows who the fuck they are when they're young.
No.
And being young is tough, especially not that it's easy for young women, but the amount of hormones and testosterone running through a young man's body.
Oh, yeah.
I say this having 2 teenage sons.
Oh, yeah.
They're out of fucking control.
Oh, yeah.
The decision-making process completely insane, and it seems like you were able to find yourself in that pursuit. There was something about it that drew you to it.
Yeah.
And then the fact that you're still alive, actually, for as long as you've been doing it, and the headspace that you have described, I think it's actually it's really the only healthy approach to it, is to actually, if you're not considering the totality of what can happen, and if you are bumping up with mental hurdles on the way, like you're probably better off not putting your toes over the edge. If you have all these mental blocks and you haven't totally thought it through, because you are lying to yourself if you haven't really thought at it at that level.
I agree 100%, and I do feel like there are many approaches to teaching, right? And I probably am not the best teacher. Like I've only taught a few people. Actually, I've been teaching my fiance over the last 6 years, like how to jump. And
do you talk to her on the bridge? Be like, listen, so you're going to die.
Yes, I actually do, and it's funny because she's like, Jeb, you make this so hard. Like it
should be hard.
And I'm like, I'm all Allie, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you can't handle me saying things like this to you at the exit point, then you shouldn't be doing this. Literally, because this sport is very brutal, and again, I have kind of a problem with people just showing good footage all the time. Like all they show is their successful jumps and everything going well and everything looks great, and all you see is these compilation videos of everything looking rad and everything looking fun. And when someone dies, they take the footage and destroy it, or they won't show it to anyone. Or when they get injured, they refuse to let people even know it happened, right? And I think that's doing a major disservice to people who are thinking about getting into it.
Do you get email? I get emails, literally people who have never jumped, and these are the ones that scare me. Hey, what's the fastest way that I can get into that wingsuit thing?
Yeah.
Or, hey, I just started skydiving. How many jumps do you think I need to do before I put a wingsuit on?
That's I hate to say it, that's the majority of people, is what is the least amount of effort I have to put in to make this happen.
That's what happens, though, when most of the footage, if not all, is peaks and there's no valleys.
Yeah.
If it was forward-facing head cam going into the fucking base of a tree at 120, and there was a dossier of those, people might back the fuck off a little bit.
Well, and there's a guy named Tom Aiello who teaches courses at the Prine, and I think he's got the best approach I've ever seen of anything. And he forces a person, when they're going to take his course, to sign basically a suicide letter to their family.
Fuck.
That's straight up. He's all, you need to write a letter to your family.
I've heard of this.
Letting them know that you're doing this and that you are willing to die, that you are accepting your death by doing this. This is 100% your choice, and you need to tell them why. Like, why you're doing this. So he forces them to do that first. And then second, he forces them to watch something called the fatality tape, which is just a tape of base jumping fatalities. Like things that killed people while base jumping. You watch these people die. And the idea that, I don't want to see that. Well, then what are you doing here?
Yeah, because it may not. Well, actually, the easiest thing would be if it did happen to you, because you wouldn't fucking know it.
Exactly.
The sport is.
Well, it's about scaring you out of it, right? So it helps you understand yourself. Like, I've met a couple jumpers who are very experienced. Who, for instance, there was we were doing WWL. And
World Wingsuit League.
Yeah, World Wingsuit League. It's a
You're
race
racing, essentially. Smoke. It's fancy. It's not a big deal.
The best wingsuit pilots in the world. But we had the greatest pilots there. And one of them had just had a really serious accident. And they had a midair collision. And the guy who hit him, like he was flying, he actually got hit by another pilot. And the guy who hit him died on impact. And it broke his legs and stuff. Anyways, he had the footage from the pilot who hit him, his camera. And the camera actually ended up facing back into the helmet.
No
So you
way.
see the guy's face.
Post-impact.
Post-impact.
Yeah.
So you see the impact, you see him unconscious, and you see spiraling. And everyone thinks, I have an AAD, that'll save me. Not in a wingsuit, it won't.
Yeah.
And the reason why it won't is because he starts spinning and spinning and spinning and builds up so much centrifugal force that you see his eyes come out of his skull and the brains follow him.
Are you fucking serious?
Yeah. So he's dead before he's long dead. I mean, if he didn't die on impacting my buddy, he died from his eyes coming out and his brain just basically exploding in his skull from the centrifugal force.
Sometimes I wish GoPro wasn't 4K.
Yeah.
I'll take that one in like a 1080p.
But the thing though is it's important to understand that though.
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of people are in this delusional state that, if I get knocked out, I have my AED to save me. In skydiving, like forget base jumping, like skydiving is a safe world, right?
Is it?
Well,
it's because they've never been in a spin skydiving and blown their blood vessels because they were spinning so fast.
Exactly.
And that happens like that.
But what got me wasn't, the footage was what it was,
Yeah.
And it's very visceral and it's very educational. Like you learn instantly. More than anyone saying something to you, anyone talking to you, witnessing that instantly locks it into your brain. Okay, if I start spinning out of control, open a reserve. Do something. Like you got to stop that as quick as possible, because if it gets too far out and you go and you lose consciousness, you're done, right? Or you could be done.
Yeah.
So, but one of the pilots, very experienced, he wouldn't watch the footage. He refused. It's like, I don't want to see that. And it's like, dude, what are you talking about? Because they're like, it's morbid. And dude, this is training. This is teaching. This is a teachable moment. You can learn from this. This can help save you. And he was arguing that an AAD would save you. And I'm like, why don't you just watch? And you'll know that delusional thing that you have in your head that's making you feel more comfortable and confident about what you're doing isn't true. Like, isn't real. At least there's a good chance that it's not going to work for you. So I when people try to deny reality or won't look at reality, or that to me is concerning. It's always been concerning. And I've always been a person like, again, one of the reasons why I think a lot of jumpers throughout my career haven't liked me or don't like me is because I am so honest about how dangerous it is, right? And they're like, you're just dramatizing. I'm like, or they're like, you're either dramatizing it or you're making the sport look bad. And I'm always like, well, the sport makes the sport look bad. Like, I'm not doing anything other than just saying what my experience has been. Like, my book is just my experiences.
Yeah.
It's just what has happened to me. I'm not making things up. I'm not telling stories that didn't happen. I mean, these are things that happened to me. These are my experiences. And maybe, someone gets in the sport and they have different experiences than I do, right? Maybe it hasn't been as heavy for them or as extreme for them. They haven't seen as many people die.
They should know it's possible, though.
Well, if you've been in the sport for a decade,
it's a meat grinder.
You've seen it.
Yeah.
It's happened. I mean, when Allie, I was training her, and we were going to Lots of Burden for our first trip.
Which is the most amazing fucking valley. It's like a postcard everywhere you look.
It's literally where Lord of the Rings comes from. Like that. Yeah. That's what inspired the book. Was this place? Like the valley of the like pointy-eared dudes who are basically with the waterfalls.
Yeah.
That's this place.
It's fucking amazing.
The elf place is where this is. So it's stunning. It's stunning. But it's also the Valley of Death. You go there, you're going to watch people die. I mean, that's just it. And I told her this. I'm like, okay, we're going there. I just want you to prepare yourself because when we're there, you're most likely going to see someone die. And she's like, oh, God, Jeb, why are you so dark? Like, does everything have to be death? Why is it always so dark? And I'm like, I'm just preparing you for the reality of what we're about to do. So just prepare yourself. And she just kind of blew me off like, yeah, whatever, you're just being dark. First jump, first day.
No way.
Dude, actually, it was not first jump. It was second jump. We did Yellow Ocean first, and then
Yellow Ocean is the traditional warm-up in the valley.
Yeah, for your first cliff off there, you go to Yellow Ocean because it's overhanging. It's the safest. And then for our second jump, we decided to go to Lemous. And you know Lemous. It's right next to Yellow Ocean. It's about 400 feet taller.
Watch out for the moss.
Yes, and
Don't fucking slip and fall.
They call it Lemous because it means the moss in French because it's slippery. But in any event, we're getting ready. We're gearing up. There's a group of like 6 guys who were there before us. And we're all kind of gearing up together. She gets ready first, and like I'm putting my stuff on, and all of a sudden, she gets to the edge, and she's like looking over, and she's like, "Hey, like what's that?" And I'm like looking at what she's kind of pointing at, and I thought she was pointing. You know how the waterfall has that flag?
Yep.
I thought she was pointing at the flag, and I'm like, "Oh, that's just the flag for the waterfall." She said, "No, not that. What's that?" And there was like a tree that I couldn't see, so I look around the tree, and sure enough, canopy on the wall across. Basically, someone was jumping high nose, and they're obviously on the wall, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh, no." You're like. So instantly we have to call down. So we call the helicopter, and we're like, we see. They're like, we see a canopy hung up on the wall about halfway down, high nose, and they're like, yeah, we know. We're in the process of trying to do a rescue. They'll do not jump, stay where you are.
Yep.
Give us like 30 minutes. Call us back in 30 minutes. So we call them back 30 minutes later. They're like, no, we're still in the process. So every 30 minutes for like 4 hours, we're calling them, and we can just see this whole thing unfolding, and it becomes the longest long line rescue basically in history. Over 2,000 feet of long line.
That's what I was thinking in my head when you were describing this. Like, holy shit. Because the helicopter's not going to be able to just bump up against that.
No. It was, the rescue was the gnarliest rescue I've ever seen. They had to go get extra long lines. That's why it was taking so long.
Was the jumper still alive?
Oh, no, he was dead on impact. But we didn't know that. I mean, nobody knew that at the time. I mean, yes, he was dead on impact. He wasn't alive. They were doing a body recovery. I think they knew by like the 4th hour that it was a recovery, not actually getting someone, but...
You'll like this story, not to interrupt yours. I'm in the valley, and a group of 3 people are going to send it off, high ultimate, off of the ramp.
Yeah.
Get a good fucking push. Got
to push hard there, yeah.
Got to push hard. One of the 3 doesn't and hangs himself up in the trees. Canopy comes out.
Okay.
His 2 buddies go to the fucking horner and just are like, leave him. Dead. They go up there, and the fucker's still alive. They had already called his family.
Wow, those are good friends. Jeez.
Buddy is only half the word.
Wow. That's a horrible
That's why I asked if the person was still alive, because the one time I was there, the fucker was still alive.
Wow.
I'm not saying he was in great shape.
No, but I mean, the problem is they went, even if he wasn't alive, you don't just go to the horner and go get drinks. You call. I mean...
Yeah.
Wow, that's bad friends. That's terrible friends. You got to be careful who you jump with. And it's funny because that was one thing that, I always thought of base jumping kind of as, again, I'm not a soldier. I've never been to war. I know very little about it. But I've always seen how there's like this brotherhood, right? Whenever you watch movies or you see anything, that these people care about each other. And
sometimes.
They make it look like that.
Yeah.
From what
on
you
TV,
see,
for sure.
From what you gather, it's this like brotherhood of people who, if someone falls, you're going to do what you can to get them out. Like that's always been something that I've seen that you respect. You respect about military. And that's how I've always felt about base jumping, right? You have a group of guys, you're working together, you're usually in very remote places. Yeah. If something bad happens, they're going to be the ones who save you. Like they're going to be the one, you're going to be relying on them to get your ass out of there. And what you just told me is one of the grandest violations of just the most basic with like friend, or even forget friend, human. Like just even if you're not friends with this dude, a human being should at least be like trying to get to the body. You know? That's remarkable. That's a remarkable story.
My theory is if you go into the mountains with people, you come out together. You go in together, you come out together. If something happens, it's an all-stop, and it's an individual group sport as far as I'm concerned. But I agree with you. You got to be cautious with who you go in the mountains with.
Well, those guys, I mean, I'd love to, after this is done, you can tell me who they are because I don't ever want
I didn't actually know their names because I believe they were very, very new into the sport. I think it was their first trip into the valley. I was actually looking for, because it was me and my buddy were there, and we had jumped quite a bit together. We had similar military experiences. We were looking to hopefully run into them. We wanted to have a little chat.
Well, yeah, because that's just, I've never.
It's as fucked up as it gets.
I haven't heard of anything like it. Like, that's unique. That's unique.
Yeah.
But I will say this. I've seen stuff from high ultimate that boggles the mind and defies, like, physics.
We should describe it. So it's essentially a large metal ramp that somebody local puts up every year.
Well, the ramp's not always there.
Because you can rappel down, right? Isn't there a lower ledge?
So there's two jumps. There's the high ultimate,
which is the ramp.
which is sometimes.
Yeah.
The ramp is only there during the winters.
You're fucking insane to try to jump that without a ramp.
Most people do, though.
You better get a good running start.
What it is, it's the highest cliff that's easy access at in the Lauterbrunnen Valley.
Yeah.
It's almost 2,000 something feet tall. And it has like this positive belly that comes out. You have to jump at least 20 feet out. I mean, it's a big jump. Like, it's not little. You got to push really hard, have a good jump to get away from this thing. And the problem is it's also just a 1 minute hike. So it's like the
downhill.
That's like the easiest place to jump from. So base jumpers are sometimes pretty lazy, and they don't want to actually have to like work too hard to get places. So it's become a very popular place to jump, even though it's a very dangerous jump to do. I mean, I think it's now the number one killer and injurer, like, that injures people and kills people in the valley, because it is technical, very technical jump. Anyway, I've witnessed people there do. It's hard to even describe because what I'm going to tell you doesn't sound real. And even now, remembering it and witnessing it, I still have difficulty wrapping my head around everything I saw. But what it was I was standing there actually with Fred and Vince. You know Fred and Vince?
Yeah.
So I was actually with Vince, who's no longer with us, but he's a wonderful guy, super nice. And we're just sitting there like...
super tragic.
Oh, tragic. But anyways, he's super duper nice guy, really friendly. You wouldn't even know he was French. Anyway, really good dude. and we're just sitting there like talking stuff, and all of a sudden, the wind starts picking up, and you're like, wow, it's kind of getting strong, And then all of a sudden, we see a guy going off. We see him in free fall tracking, and you're like, ooh, let's see how this goes, because the winds are pretty strong, but still somewhat reasonable. You see him open, and you see him kind of backing up under canopy and land, and you're like, oh, okay. Then all of a sudden, the wind picks up like triple that speed. Where you're like, oh, whoa, this is like really strong. And then all of a sudden we see another guy in free fall, and we're like, oh no, like this isn't going to be good. And he opens up and he's flying backwards really fast, but he ends up landing safely again. And you're like, okay. And then the wind really picks up. My guess is 60, 70 miles an hour. Like, it's so strong that, the valley's all grass. It starts literally pulling grass up off the ground. And it's almost like, think of like a dirt devil, but everywhere. Like this, I'm like, what? I mean, super strong wind where you're actually kind of pushing against it to stay standing upright.
Which is obviously a fucking no-go for jumping.
Dude, it's absolutely unbelievable how strong the wind was. And all of a sudden, we see a third guy. And we're like, oh no. Like, this is going to be serious. Like, this is very, very bad. It's so bad that he's actually being pushed sideways in his track. So you see him crabbing sideways, the wind's blowing him so hard. His parachute deploys, and it doesn't deploy above his head. It deploys sideways.
Oh, he's so fucked.
So the wind is so strong, it's faster than what he's falling. Like, it's literally it pushes his canopy sideways, and you see it open, and then he just flies sideways, like completely sideways. And then at the high ultimate, there's a cable car that takes you up. You've been there, right? So you know the cable car. Okay, so you'll understand what I'm saying. It's going to be hard for people who haven't seen this, but people have seen cable cars and understand how they work. He hits the cable car, like the actual cable itself. Ugh. So as he hits it, the canopy goes above it, and he goes below it, and it actually spins him around the cable 3 times. So
you watch this happen.
Wait. It's work. That's just the beginning. So he hits it, it spins him 3 times, and you're just like, holy shit. But it's so strong that it continues pulling and wraps him back 3 times the other way again. So you see him go, woof, 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 and then it grabs and then yanks him and pulls him and goes, pulls him off. He hits the building. So you know that building that it's attached to? He hits that building. and then it pulls him up the side of the building 3 stories. So he literally hits the building and drags him up to the top of the building. As he gets to the top, there's like an antenna with like these like spikes coming off of it.
Yeah.
And he tries to grab onto it. So he grabs onto this antenna of spikes, and you're just like, ah, like unbelievable. You see him get ripped over the top of it, and you just see him disappear behind the back of the building.
This guy's having the worst base jumping experience I've ever heard of.
I mean, this guy's dead. Like, there's 0% chance he's alive. We are going to a dead body. So Vince and I just start running. So we run. We run around the building. We see him like laying on the ground, and I think I'm coming to a dead guy. And all of a sudden, as I get close, he starts trying to stand up. He's totally dazed. Blood's coming out of everywhere, and you're just like, dude, like stay down. Like, stop moving. Don't move. Lay down. Where, help is on the way. We'd already called. They're already coming. Don't worry. Just stay where you are. But he wasn't listening. Like, you could see he was like, when a person gets knocked out and they're like, he's kind of like still trying to stand up.
He had a rough few moments.
Oh, dude. Well, this is what's shocking. He barely got hurt. He broke his leg. And there was obviously lacerations and cuts and stuff, but he got out of the hospital that night. And I was like, what? It boggled my mind, because if you had seen what I saw, you're like, this is a dead person.
Yeah, it's a faces of death video.
0% chance a person could survive it. Unsurvivable. And he got out with a broken leg. And I was like, but that's what's crazy about, like, I guess the sport and life, right? You can have like the tiniest little thing, right? You can slip in your bathtub and kill yourself, or fall down the stairs, or whatever and die. Or you can do that, right? This can happen to you, and
just
you can
send the high ultimate 90 mile an hour wind and be okay.
I wish I knew how fast the winds were.
Because if it was pulling grass up and out, it had to be 60 plus.
It was definitely over 60, but it could have been 90. Because what it was, we realized is a storm was coming.
Yeah,
it was basically, you could see a big like Thunderhead coming our way, and it would just send this crazy strong wind. And it was just, I've seen things that are so impossible to believe. Like, and I got into sport, like I said earlier, thinking, oh, that's kind of a dangerous thing to do,
Yeah, but when you got into it, there wasn't. I mean, what year did you start?
I started skydiving in '94.
Yeah, internet wasn't what it was. Social media wasn't what it was. There's no fucking YouTube.
No, but we had videos though.
Yeah, but the people who were proximal to jumping had videos.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, you could be on your phone and you're like somebody in fucking, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a country in the middle of goddamn
Iran.
We'll just say Kentucky.
Yeah.
It was never going to jump. They have access to it, and they're watching what you're doing, and they could develop an interest.
Well, yeah, dude, so you can track videos on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
You know where people are watching. People are watching me in the Vatican. I mean, you're like, who's watching this in the Vatican? Right? You're like, what?
Who is this man in all black defying the Lord?
It's bizarre, but you can see, like, it's everywhere. Every country, everywhere in the world is watching this stuff. And like you said, with YouTube now, it is literally, I mean, when I started base jumping, people ask me, so what do you do? Right? I mean, I've been earning a living as a base jumper now since I was 21, so for 25 years. I've been a professional base jumper. And when I started base jumping, people would say, what do you do? And I'm like, oh, I'm a base jumper. They're like, oh, you're in a band? They think I'm a bass drummer, right? I'm like, no, I'm a bass jumper, and you'd have to spend like 20 minutes explaining what bass jumping is, because people just didn't know.
Or you just say, yeah, I'm a bass drummer, and you fucking walk off. That's the move.
That's a better move.
15 questions into the night, you're like, bass drummer.
Although I enjoy engaging. I like talking to people, so for me, I would enjoy the process of like explaining it and getting people to understand. But
you were in it long before it had achieved the. I mean,
nobody knew what it was. Yeah,
nobody knew what it was. And fast forward now. I mean, you're the technical advisor in the new Point Break movie, which, by the way, you fuckers combined like 3 different jumps into that, maybe a different exit point. Well,
it was actually 60 jumps, and it was 2 exit points.
I know,
but I will say this: they used very minimal CGI on the wingsuit flying sequence, and what they did with that sequence was mind-boggling. I don't think people can fully grasp what they did there, but it was, when I watched what they were going for, what they were trying to get, and the fact they wanted 4 guys flying close proximity, going between camera positions, in between trees, it was the gnarliest thing I've ever seen in my life. so gnarly. I mean, and there's
when you super slow-mo the final take when John's tail wing is touching the grass, it's like, listen, guys, if that's not what you wanted, I don't know what to tell you, because closer equals one of these fours going in.
Yeah, well, we're not going to go into that. Let's just say that wasn't on the plan. You know, so,
that was probably. I mean, and for people who know what we're talking about, there's actually one of your very viral and famous videos, Grinding the Crack, which I introduced Michael to. He's such a fucking. I'm like teaching him about life. He had never even. I mean, he's probably Googling right now, like, do not be on the Squirrel website buying shit right now. He's on the fence as to whether or not he wants to be a base jumper, but.
By the end of this conversation, he's not going to want to be a base jumper.
I know. I'm kind of like watching him. He's just like, ah. Yeah. But that jump, and so for people who would some idea of what we're talking about, go onto YouTube and Grinding the Crack. Grinding the Crap. That would be a good one too.
No, Grinding the Crack.
Yeah.
Well, that's why Grinding the Crack is why it was in Point Break.
Yeah.
That was the reason. Yeah.
So it's in Wallenstadt, right? The town now.
Yep,
Sputnik exit, and it doesn't look like much until you get closer to the actual crack itself. There's a large field that you can kind of use as a gun site.
Yeah.
And you can see your video, and then go to the trailer for Point Break and put it on slow motion and go frame by frame when the four of them are coming at you, and you will watch the rear leading edge between his legs, the tail wing, is literally contacting the grass. That's about as low as it gets.
He had grass hitting him in the face. So if you
if
you have grass hitting you in the face and you're about 5'10", what's happening with your legs behind you? You know.
Well, and think about this: if you were doing that jump by yourself and you had grass hitting you in the face, that's one thing.
Oh yeah.
He was in a formation.
Oh yeah.
That's a completely different ball of wax.
Anyways,
and we'll leave it at that.
I'm glad he survived, and it's an incredible scene.
Yeah.
It is. Most people do not grasp the magnitude of what that scene is, what went into creating it. It is hands down the gnarliest thing ever filmed and placed on footage that doesn't involve people dying. Like, it is absolutely unbelievable, and it's fascinating because a lot of people, when we were actually in the editing bay, and nothing had been done to it. Like, it was raw footage. And the guy who was editing it, he's like going, man, you guys are really good on the CGI. And they're like, we're like,
that's raw footage, homie.
That's raw, bro. It hasn't even been color graded yet, dude. What are you talking about? It's like, he's all, this wasn't done with wires? And it's like, no. That was really a dude doing that.
You couldn't recreate that with wires. It would look so fake.
No, that was the whole point, right? They wanted it to be as real. And that's what I loved about Erickson Core and the making of that particular film. Was they wanted everything to be done as real as possible. And I love that when, you get directors and producers who are like, we want to do this for real. And actually it's funny because they came to me for the wingsuit sequence. Like, yeah, we want to get 4 dudes, to fit into this. And they gave me the script and this is the storyline. And we just need 4 guys flying close proximity, going in between trees and doing something super gnarly. And I'm like, well, there's only one place for that.
Yeah, and you know the guys.
Yeah, and we know all the best guys. So it was a wonderful experience, and it was great to work on. It's funny because in my book, I have a chapter on Point Break, but I don't really talk about any of that.
Yeah.
It's funny.
It will be lost on most people who are not jumpers and haven't physically been there and flown it themselves. It's
well, and I also I used that chapter as an opportunity to talk about something that I felt mattered, which was death. Yeah. And people's understanding of death. And it was interesting because I start out the chapter talking about Point Break and then I actually, like, halfway through, I'm like, okay, but it all happened, it was great, but that's not really what I want to talk about. And then I go into the concept of what death is, and people's understanding of what death is. And it was funny because I was forced to go do, like, publicity for the film. Like, I'm not an actor, and I don't do that.
I saw you acting in the film. What are you talking about? Technically, you are an actor, Jeb.
I was doing cameos myself, but I'm not an actor, right? So ordinarily, I don't go do press for films. Like, that's not. I mean, if I work on a movie, I'm basically like a stunt dude. We do stuff. Nobody knows we're there. We're pretending to be someone else, right? So
nobody knows Tim Rigby is the guy in Iron Man ejecting
and everything. Like Tim Rigby in every movie ever made. I mean, Matrix. He was the ghost. I mean, yeah. Anyways,
was he really?
Yeah, he was one of the ghosts.
That little English fuck.
I know you pick a movie back from like he died. I think he died like 10 different times in 300. He was three. Like
that's where I met him. It was on the set of 300.
Really?
Yeah, that's how we got linked up through Mark Twain.
Oh,
it was so awesome. awesome.
That's good. So you were one of the 300 guys?
Fuck no. I was still active duty. Fuck no. I was active duty military, and I was recovering from getting shot overseas, and I had changed the workout style of. I had been doing like chest and tries and back and buys and running for like forever, which is what people did. And I got exposed to a different methodology through Mark Twight. He came to the command I was at, and then he was up shooting, and it gave me the opportunity basically just to go work with him on the exercise side of the house. So I just basically hung out with Mark and worked out with everybody as they rotated their way through.
So you were the guy that's basically training Tim and getting them all ripped and cut.
I mean, I was the guy hanging out with the dude, going to craft services quite a bit, and they'd be like, does anybody want a milkshake? I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll take 2 of those. And I would work out. But he introduced me to Tim, and it just started a friendship that has continued since then.
Well, Tim's the greatest human being on the face of the planet.
He's fucking awesome.
I mean, he's the one who told me I need to come here and hang and talk with you. I mean, Tim is. I mean, I've been jumping with Tim since 19. Either 98 or 99.
He's a sleeper. Like,
Dude.
Meaning people would sleep on him and have no idea the places that he has been and the things that he has done.
He's and he's so humble and and the single most professional human being I've ever met in my life. I've never seen anyone. I
can't stand it, actually, how professional he is. I want to see some cracks in it. It's just like, dude, have an explosion of some kind.
No, he is. I mean, it's funny because like I wrote a whole chapter about him. Like, there's a chapter about him in my book. That's how a pivotal human being he was in my life. And I love him I just love him as a person. Like, period. I can't say enough good things about the dude. And what I love about him too is that he likes the anonymity of his job. He likes being a stunt guy because nobody knows who he is. Yep. You know, and that's where like getting into this thing of them literally forcing me to go do press because they had hired actors that people didn't really know that well. So they wanted the actual athletes to be the things that they used to promote the film. And I was like, yeah, but I don't do that, you know. Anyway,
how did it go?
It was interesting. but what happened? I
could see you frustrating reporters.
Oh, dude, I'd never had that much respect for actors. I always thought they were kind of like monkeys. But after going through what they go through, it's a hard job, dude. And those press junkets, holy shit, man! It's like 8 hours of nonstop. Every 15 minutes, a new dude comes in, and
same questions though.
And mind-numbing. Like, I don't know how they don't lose their minds and just freak out because it was a disturbing experience. I didn't like it. But in any event, we did it. And as I was flying home, so to me, the most interesting part of that whole movie was on my flight home from this press junket, right? And we're in an airport. I'm in the airport with all of the heads of like Warner Brothers and all the like Alcon and all the production company. And one thing you never do when you're in a business setting is talk about religion. You just don't do that. Like, you don't talk about religion. You don't talk about politics. You know, you don't.
Hey, buddy, so what are your thoughts on abortion?
Yeah, you just don't. But especially religion, right? You don't get into this. And for some reason, I was sitting next to the head of Warner Brothers Distribution. She's a super lovely lady, really nice. She'd been drinking a little bit. She's kind of tipsy. And I actually write this story in my book because I found it fascinating. Because it was the first time I ever had an actual real conversation with someone about death, like what death actually is, you know. And it was fascinating because I'd always kind of thought this, but I'd never actually verbalized it before. And then when I was speaking with her, she started talking about like spirituality, and like she's like, I'm not really religious, but I'm spiritual. And I'm just like, what do you mean by that? Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you mean by spiritual? Like, what does that word mean to you? You know. And she kind of goes in, well, you know, you're the thing that's not part of your body, like the thing that goes on after you die. I'm like, really? So explain it to me. Like, what is this thing? Like, what is this thing?
Nobody fucking knows, Jeb. All right?
Well, again, I think they do. That's the argument that I kind of came up with. Like, at that moment, I was like, really? I'm like, well, so explain to me what you're basically talking about soul, right? Or that's what you're
Sounds
trying
like.
to say. So explain to me, what is a soul? And she's just like, well, it's you. It's the essence of you. It's who you are. It's the thing that makes a moral decision or an immoral decision. So I'm like, okay, so let's say there's a God. Is it the thing that if you do bad things, he's going to judge you on? Or if you do good things, he'll judge you on that? And she's like, yeah, it's your essence. It's what will be judged after you die. And I was like, huh. Let me ask you a question. I mean, what you really sounds like you're kind of describing is the human mind, like your thought process, the way you think. And she's like, yeah, but it's separate. It's separate from you. Like, it goes on after you die. And I'm like, okay, I can actually logically prove that's just not true. Like, right now. Like, right here. I mean, and I can do it very easily. In psychology class when I was in college, they talk about a very famous case, very famous. And it was a man who was working as a foreman. I forget his name, but he was working as a foreman on a railroad. And an explosion happened which sent a railroad tie through his skull, separating his frontal lobe from the back of his brain. Okay? He survived the accident. And they started studying him because obviously no one had ever survived such a massive traumatic brain trauma.
Yeah.
Right? He became a different human being.
Oh, I bet.
Oh, we don't bet. You know.
Yeah.
Right? You know when you damage a person's brain, they become a different person. And he did. He became, and they literally studied him until his death, and he became a different person making different choices. His whole life was different after that. So did you damage his soul? I mean, think about that for a second. If I can damage your brain and change the decisions that you'll make in your life, right? Have I damaged your soul? Or does that not even exist at all? And all you're doing is interchanging the word soul for mind. Because that's what the brain does, right? Your brain is very complicated and creates a mind in order to process all of the information you're getting throughout your life. So all these senses, your sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch, all of these senses are your connection to the reality that exists outside of yourself, right? And your mind is trying to make sense of all of this information that's coming in. And your memories are how you keep track of it, right? So that's literally the brain's purpose. That's what it does. So if I can give you a lobotomy, right, and change the way, the decisions that you make, the things that would morally be judged after your death, then how can that exist, right? If damaging your brain changes it, don't you think killing it will change it quite a bit more, right? And then, so this concept, and she's just like, and it was funny because, all of a sudden it started getting real heavy, right? And when people, like, when things get like that really heavy, I noticed that there's like a kind of a default statement that's made that kind of is, okay, we're ending this conversation now, right? and the default thing was, she's like, well, nobody really knows what happens when you die, right? That's what she said, and that's the default. Okay, I get it. And everyone just accepts that, right? But I decided, you know what? Not this time. No, I'm going to actually this conversation's continuing. I'm not done. And it's funny because everyone, dude, think about this for a second. I'm around executives, and every one of them are just looking at me like, what? Are you seriously having this conversation right now? Like, this is the craziest conversation. They were not expecting it.
No.
And what I did is I'm like, I want to do a thought experiment with you. And I just want you to just don't reject what I'm about to say. Just for a moment. I'm not even saying this is what I think or believe or anything. We're going to do a thought experiment where we're just going to think about something and just be open to the thought, right? Not rejecting it, not even accepting it. Just this idea, okay? And the idea is that we know exactly what happens when we die. That actually, out of all the things we know, most things are up for debate. Like most things, it could be this, it could be that. We're still in the middle of, who knows? I'm going to make the argument that death may be the one thing we actually know. Like if there's a knowable thing, like if anything is knowable, death is the one thing that's knowable, right?
It's going to happen.
Well, let's look at language, right? Languages throughout history. Every single language has a word for it. And the word is not ambiguous. Like the definition of what that word is, if you look up death in the dictionary, it's not ambiguous.
Yeah.
It's not a question that maybe you hang out afterwards.
It wouldn't serve society well if it was ambiguous.
But that's the point, right? So when you say, well, nobody really knows, well, every language in history has had a word for it that describes it quite clearly, right? And then beyond that, would you pretend you don't know what happens when a fish dies? Do people pretend they don't know what happens when cows die or when chickens die? No, everyone knows. You know what happens to a fish when it dies. It dies, you cut it up, you cook it, you eat it. Its energy becomes part of you for a little while. You poop it out, then it becomes energy for bugs and trees and plants. It's this cycle that we know. We don't.
But what about its soul, Jeb?
But again, that's kind of the whole point, right? That word, I think, is a word that was developed by people terrified of death.
It makes it easier to accept.
This is the thing. We've known what death is since the time of Neanderthal. We know that Neanderthal buried their dead, meaning they understood death. Yeah. They understood that their dead got eaten by things. They didn't like that, so they tried to prevent that from happening, right? And I think what happens is people have known what death is for a very long time and don't like what they know. And because they don't like what they know, they come up with elaborate fairy tales to make themselves feel better about it. And we've come up with tens of thousands of these fairy tales to make ourselves feel better about what we already know. We're trying desperately to convince ourselves it's something different. But I'm going to tell you what death is, and it's not going to surprise you. You know, I write about this in my book, but this is something, when I tell us, you're going to be like, yeah, no shit. I mean, that's what we know. It's not even a question. You know, when you die, you melt right back into the universe from where you came, and you're released from consciousness. I mean, there you go. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. And you know what's even more amazing about that statement? It's more incredible than any made-up nonsense you could ever tell yourself, right? It's kind of like when people used to say that, oh, the sun is a firefly that flew too high into the sky, right?
Which is pretty sweet, though.
Yeah.
As far as stories go, that's a fucking good one.
But is it more impressive than the fact that it's a nuclear furnace? Right?
Definitely not more impressive. But that's just a more boring story.
But is it? I think the reality of what the sun actually is way more impressive than any of the made-up fairy tales we ever said about it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the reality, and this is another thing, like I have a lot of people, you know, throughout my life, and it's a big part of my book, actually, from you reading it, you know. Because I dated religious people and I've been around religious people. You are. I mean,
yeah.
A lot of people are very religious.
Yeah, they're going to come in and out of your life.
They come in and out of your life all the time, and you have conversations because you're. It's fascinating. You know, you want to hear their side, they want to hear your side, and I'm always open to have these conversations because I like them. I think it's fun to think, right? To have these thought experiments, to have these kind of ideas, you know, because that's how you grow and learn, you know. But in any event, I find it. I think I lost my track of thought.
You were talking about basically the fairy tales that we tell each other.
Oh, just how the realities are just so much more beautiful than the fantasies that people make up to try to make themselves feel better. And
then it begs a better second question too: is would it change people's behavior if they were forced to confront the objective reality versus the fairy tale? Because look at people, and I'm sure everybody in this room knows somebody who, or maybe they've had it themselves. The near-death experience. Mm-hmm. It'll reframe the way you make decisions. Mm-hmm. It'll reframe your value system. Mm-hmm. I think the fairy tale actually elicits shittier behavior than confronting the objective reality. Like my theory on life, and I'm not recommending anybody follow this theory, is that it's meant to be lived, not saved up. Mm-hmm. I say that because I think I fall in line with what you feel about death as well, too. And I've been around, unfortunately, more than probably people's fair share of death. And I've been confronted with it, both in the base jumping world, skydiving world, and then in my previous job. And like, fuck, man, I need to pack it in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that is the thing. Once, like I have, and that's where I was going with this. If I've had people say, well, how can you do what you do thinking that there's nothing after you die? Like, how could you possibly do such dangerous things when you know that it's over? And I'm all, that's exactly how I can do such dangerous things.
Yeah.
Because I understand that my life is limited. I only have a very short period of time to exist, and I need to do what I can with that little limited time that I get.
Well, and tomorrow's not a promise to you whether you're a base jumper or not.
No. And this is the thing. We know we're alive right now. Like, if you go through philosophy, right, like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, this idea that you exist, that's the only thing you can be certain of. You can be certain of your own existence. You can't even be certain of my existence. Right?
I mean, I'm pretty sure, but I mean, I'll leave like 1% on the table for
exactly.
you.
There's always a chance that maybe I don't. Maybe you're dreaming right now in bed.
The simulation theory.
Yes, exactly.
Fuck, that's a rabbit hole.
But the concept is the only thing you can be absolutely certain of. By Descartes, like his whole search for certainty philosophy is that you know of your own existence, right? Everything else is up for whatever. But this idea that you know that you exist, you know you're here right now. So don't throw that little bit of time you have away for something that's dubious at best. I mean, dubious. And this concept that, your life has no meaning if you don't believe, is like the opposite. It gives your life more meaning.
It's easier to believe that somebody else has their hand on the wheel than to take ownership of driving your own path.
Exactly. And making your own decisions and owning your mistakes.
That's why I think the fairy tales elicit, I think they're more dangerous than the objective reality. But they're easier. It's like the spoonful of sugar.
Yeah.
They're easier to go down.
Well, it's nice to blame the devil. It's nice to blame demons.
It's nice to blame everybody other than yourself.
Exactly. It's nice to blame
It's fucking your fault and your fault. Definitely not your fault. Your fault.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier. And another thing I've noticed too is, unfortunately, I've been to quite a few funerals. Right.
Same.
And the people who are the most religious, or say they are, usually tend to take death the worst, which always fascinates me. Because I'm like, if you truly believe what you say you believe, then this person's not dead.
Yeah, they've moved on to a better place.
And yeah, you're going to go hang out with them when you die. So
unless you know they did gnarly shit.
Well,
and you're like, maybe they went down, not up.
I think it's more of the fact that they know it's not true. And I think that they're struggling very hard to convince themselves it is. And that's the thing, is and this was my argument with this lady, that I'm not saying I know.
Yeah.
I'm saying you know. You're very well aware of what death is. You know what it is, and you do not like what you know. And because you do not like what you know, you have to try to convince yourself it's something different. And for me, that was a very fascinating conversation. And it was the first time I ever verbalized something that I had been thinking for quite some time. I have watched a lot of people die, and that's one thing. But I've also experienced death myself. I've died twice where I flatlined and I had stopped breathing and I was gone and I came back. And, I froze to death when I was 10 and I drowned when I was 16. And,
we're going to have to touch on those slightly deeper here in a second, but Michael's just over like, what the fuck?
but there's actually nothing that deep about them because, what I learned from them is that there was nothing. Right, and it's weird because
you didn't have a crazy out-of-body experience that some people talk about.
No, I'll get into that too. But I because I think that's all a bunch of nonsense. But I will say
it's the brain doing weird shit.
You have a preconceived idea of what death is, and you're going to show yourself that picture before you die. You're having a very elaborate dream that your brain is trying to give you to make you feel more comfortable as it's ending.
Which actually makes sense if you think about it. That's what the brain would do to ease the transition.
And it's the same thing with it dropping all of the adrenaline and endorphins and everything to kind of make you calm and feel. And you feel, I mean, I got to be honest, death feels good. It actually...
Not the first time I've heard that, actually, from people who have had near-death experiences.
Well, there's near-death and then there's death, right? Near-death hurts like a motherfucker. Like, I've had a lot of near-death experiences where you're just in pain and it's suffering and it hurts bad and you're feeling pain. And most death is kind of like that, too. Right? When I froze, freezing was very painful in the beginning. Like, I didn't feel like I was cold. I felt like I was burning. It felt like burning needles were penetrating my skin. I actually felt like I was on fire. And my first reaction was to take my clothes off. I was trying to...
They find a lot to totally nude who have frozen to death.
You try to take your clothes off. And the only reason I take my clothes off is because my friends wouldn't let me. Yeah, we were little 10-year-olds, Yeah. And I was burning. And then all of a sudden, the burning goes away. And then it becomes numb. And then all of a sudden, you become warm.
Euphoric almost.
It's this warm feeling overtakes you, and it feels good. And then all of a sudden, I was laying down. I could no longer walk, and they were dragging me. These two little 10-year-old kids dragging me over a mile and a half back to my house. And as they're dragging me, I remember just kind of everything got really quiet and very peaceful. And then all of a sudden, everything just started getting dark. And then I was gone. And what's fascinating is that from going down to coming back out, that time frame doesn't exist. It's not like a dream, like when you go to sleep and you wake up and you know time, there's been time.
Yeah.
It's not like that. For me, it wasn't. It was what happened before and what happened after fold over each other.
How long were you out for?
Don't know. There's no way. That one was quite a long time. But freezing, you can be down for a lot longer.
Oh fuck yeah! They pull people back from like hours.
Yeah, it's you can be down for a long time. We don't know. I don't know what part of the walk my friend where I lost consciousness. I don't know what part I got woken up. I don't know any of it. And this is another thing. This is why I don't believe anyone who has a really complicated near-death story when they start telling you like all these really crazy details. Bullshit. You've been knocked out. When you see somebody come back from being knocked out, or if you see someone die and you see them, I've seen it. I've watched people die and then be revived. And you want to know what their first response, the number one response is, where am I? What's going on? They don't know what day it is. Most of the time, they don't even know their own name.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, they don't know what happened. So all of a sudden, an hour later, blue light, like white lights and tunnels, and you're like, dude, you're full of shit. You're full of shit. You didn't remember what your name was. Now all of a sudden you remember all these details? Come on. Let's be serious. You want to know when the worst time to trust a person's memory? When they've just had a traumatic experience happen.
Yeah.
If you get robbed, if someone runs in and steals your shit, try to tell a cop what that person looked like.
Oh, I'd be super good at that.
Yeah, you would
I'd be
be.
like, that dead guy right there trying to steal my shit.
Yeah, he's dead now, and he looks just like that. But the point
Why shouldn't I shoot him 17 times? That's what my magazine holds. Like, don't judge me.
But that I agree with you. But that's the point, right? When you go through a traumatic experience, your memory doesn't work very well.
Yeah.
So the more detailed,
There's a reason why there's limits in what they'll allow in a court of law.
exactly.
Yeah.
But again, my point is every time I've ever seen someone either get got knocked out
Yeah.
or come back from a near death experience, like I'm not going to say near death, a death experience. Near death is different for me. Like there's death experiences and near death experiences. I can't even count near death experiences. I've had more of those than I can count. But actual death experiences are a little different, right? Because your brain goes through a different process and your brain shuts down.
Yeah.
You know, and it's your brain turning off, and that sensation of the brain turning off is very powerful, and it's quite euphoric, at least from what I can remember, right? And that's the thing is, I always have to be very careful when I talk about my memories of it because I can't be sure what memories are real and what memories are from me telling the story again.
Yeah,
right?
your brain filling the blanks in.
And you fill in blanks because people don't like not knowing stuff, right? So they're in a constant process of trying to like fill in those blanks with whatever, you know? And so I can't really trust my memory, especially of the drowning one. The drowning one, I don't trust anything. That's why when I wrote it in my book, I just straight up said, I have told this story different ways over many years. I am not really sure what happened. You know, I cannot, because my brain turned off.
Yeah.
I can't. All I kind of can remember is that things that I thought happened before ended up happening after, and things that I thought had happened after ended up happening before. And my brain, that time, it literally is gone. Like there is no time. Like there's nothing. So again, I have a real, anytime I hear someone tell ghost stories or really intricate like near-death experience stories, I'm always like, I take it with a grain of salt always, and I don't necessarily believe anything that anyone says, and I don't even think they're lying. I think that they remember it this way because memory is memory moves, memory changes. Your memories are not perfect records, you know, and once you understand that, once you grasp that, and I really get into these like, I find ghost stories fascinating, right? I have a lot of friends who've seen a lot of ghosts. And
I have some weird friends.
I have very weird friends. I mean, you know, you meet people believe in ghosts. And I always find it fascinating when somebody tells you a ghost story, right? So
They've seen a ghost or something weird happen they can't explain.
Well, that's what it always is. But
Yeah.
you know, I'll do a good one. I love this one. So I had a manager many years ago. I won't even say her name, but she was a wonderful person. I loved her a lot. She was great. And one day she starts telling me, she's like, "Oh, Jeb, I was like you. I didn't believe in ghosts. And then until I saw one." I'm like, "Really? You saw a ghost?"
Fucking do tell.
I am. You have piqued my interest. I would love to hear this story. Please explain to me. So she goes through this really elaborate tale of like how she was a chaperone for like little kids, like teenagers, like 15 to like 17, and she lived in Australia at the time. They were going on a trip to Italy for like some whatever school trip thing.
Fucking lucky kids.
I know, that's what I said. But they were going on some field trip thing to Italy. Anyway, she was the chaperone, and I think there was like 10 kids. Like it wasn't a big group, but it was 10 kids. Anyways, they went to this place, and as they were checking in, the person checking them in, he's like, "Well, I need to let you guys know our facility is haunted, so you might hear some things and blah blah blah." And she's just like, yeah, whatever. At least that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
I think deeply she kind of believed back then too, but anyways, she says she didn't believe and that she was kind of...
Well, if they lead with that, it's preconditioning as well.
Exactly, it's preconditioning. You're planting right seeds. But anyways, so she's saying she just doesn't believe them, and she's like, whatever. They have their first night. The next morning, they're having breakfast, and a few of the girls are talking about these little weird experiences they were having the night before. And she's just like, oh, stop trying to scare the other girls. That's not true. Blah blah blah. Right? This is what she's telling me. I'm like, okay, interesting. She's like, but that night, she's like, I was in bed, and she's like, right as I was going to sleep, all of a sudden I became paralyzed, and I couldn't move. And I saw this apparition of a woman in a dress come through the wall and come over the top of me. And as she got over the top of me, I started screaming, and then I got up and she was gone.
Yes, because she woke up.
I'm like, okay. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm like, okay, that's cool. I mean, that was an experience, and she believed it was a ghost.
Yeah.
I'm all. Have you ever heard of sleep apnea or basically something called the dark shadow? Have you ever heard?
I've heard of sleep apnea, not the dark shadow.
Okay, so there's this thing. It's called sleep. Actually, it's sleep paralysis is really what we're talking about. So sleep paralysis is when you go to sleep, your brain releases a hormone that paralyzes you.
Yeah, so you can rest and recover, right?
And so that you don't act out dreams.
Yeah.
So the reason why when you're dreaming about going for a jog, you don't jump up out of bed and go for a jog
Yeah.
is because this thing paralyzes you and keeps you from doing it. Now, some people, actually, this doesn't work properly, and they do jump up and go for a jog.
It's like Michael when he sleeps. He's like, don't touch me like that.
So some people, it's not working properly, and it makes them sleepwalk and don't touch me like that kind of stuff. But so what happens is sleep paralysis is a very real thing that happens to people. And for normal people who don't have a problem, what can sometimes occur is as you're falling asleep, the hormone releases while you're still awake. And when that happens, it's a terrifying experience for people because they become paralyzed. Now, you're just on the edge of dreaming. So now all of a sudden, if you've been told, oh, there's ghosts here, right? Well, now all of a sudden, this ghost apparition comes in, you have this experience, and what tells you it's sleep apnea is she's paralyzed. She can't move. The instant she finally freaks out and sits up, it's gone, right? This all tells you sleep apnea is probably very realistic. So I explain sleep apnea, sleep paralysis. Sorry, they're two different things. Sleep paralysis. So anyways, I explained sleep paralysis to her, and then I'm like, and now I want to explain something else to you. Have you ever heard of Occam's razor? And she's like, no. I'm all, well, it's a philosophical concept. And the way Occam's razor works, or it's the simplest explanation for things, is usually the correct one.
Yep.
Not always, but usually. And a great way of explaining how, showing this in a real world situation is imagine there's a crop circle, okay? And in this crop circle, you're given three possible explanations. One, it's kids with string and board going out there and stomping it down, making a crop circle.
Which is the correct answer, people.
Two, it's the government testing some new form of technology.
Yep.
Three, it's aliens from another world.
Definitely three.
Okay? So, using Occam's razor, what's the most likely explanation?
Yeah, it's the kids with, it's like, wow, well, all these concentric circles, they just keep appearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's true. Now let's say you're given more information. Now let's say that none of the stalks are broken and they're radioactive, right? There's actual radiation inside these crop circles. Of the three explanations, what's the most likely?
I still say the kids, and they had found some radioactive shit.
Well, then it's government, right? Government testing some new form of technology. That becomes...
Probably.
Because it's unlikely that they get radioactive material. So
It's sweet if they did.
It would be. But again, that's how Occam's razor works, right?
Yeah.
So it's a way of logically deducing the most likely answer. And most of the time, you can get there with that, right? So I explained these concepts to her, and I said, so now, using Occam's razor, what's more likely that happened to you? Someone came back from the dead and decided to
Haunt you.
and mess with you because they've got nothing better to do. Or you were having sleep paralysis and someone had planted this idea in your head and you basically had a waking dream. And she's just like, I mean, but again,
People want to believe.
they want to. And there's also another thing I ask people, whenever somebody tells me a really outrageous ghost story, this is my number one favorite question to ask. Have you ever used a psychedelic drug? And you want to know what the number one answer is?
Probably yes.
What does that have to do with anything? And you're like, well...
Could be some residual.
The thing is, when you use psychedelics, it blurs your line between dream and reality.
Intentionally, right? As part of the
yeah.
mechanism?
That's what you're literally doing on purpose. You're blurring the line between dream and reality. And once you do that, and this is the thing, dreams, anything is possible. Anything can be real. You can fly. You can walk through walls. You can create your own worlds. Dead people are back from the dead. I mean, you pick whatever you want, right? In a dream, anything can happen. So once you start bringing that into the real world, all of a sudden, things can get complicated for you.
And can get blurry real fast.
Very blurry, very fast. And that's why, in my book, I talk a lot about why I don't use drugs of any kind.
Yeah.
And that's why. I mean, because I like my reality. And my whole world is based on trying to experience reality for what it actually is. And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to things like base jumping or extreme activities that you do on purpose, right? My kind of concept, because I've throughout my life I've gotten this, oh, you're just a heroin addict, right? They try to parallel you with drug addict, like, oh, you just are an adrenaline junkie, right?
Yep.
You're just doing this for the adrenaline. And I'm always like, actually, I don't like adrenaline. I don't like the way adrenaline feels. I am not a sensation-seeking person. When I was in college, I had a teacher who thought I was a type T personality and I was an obvious sensation seeker. And she actually, because of what, I was into extreme sports and stuff, she actually did a test for the whole class just to see how many type Ts do we have in this class. And when I took the test, I came out as not a type T. I actually came out as neutral. Because there are a lot of things where I'm not risk adverse. I like to take risks, but there's certain things, like for instance, when it came to physical risk, like skydiving, base jumping, shark diving, doing dangerous things, I was very high. But when it came to sensation-seeking type behavior, like taking drugs, having sex with zillions of women, like, drinking tons of alcohol, things that give you like a quick sensation, I was at the bottom of the spectrum, which made me even. Which is weird. So I didn't come back type T. And I've always kind of looked at it like this. I think of myself, and again, I'm not trying to compare myself to astronauts because what they do is obviously more important for human society and just everything. What they do is huge. But I like their mindset, right? You would never call an astronaut going to the moon an adrenaline junkie. Ever. Do they get adrenaline from doing it?
Oh, fuck yeah.
Absolutely. Is that why they're doing it?
No.
The adrenaline's a negative byproduct. That is not why they're doing it. They have a mission that they're trying to accomplish, and their goal is to accomplish that mission in the safest way they possibly can and get home, right? If they could do it without any adrenaline, they would.
Yeah.
Period. And I see myself in a very similar way. I have these very intricate projects and things I'm trying to accomplish, and my goal is to accomplish them in the safest way I possibly can and come home. That's it. I'm not going. The adrenaline, I do not enjoy. I do not like the way it makes me feel. It makes me feel sick. I actually really dislike it. But the reason why I'm going there is because, people try to compare, extreme sports athletes to, drug addicts. And I always say this. I actually think a heroin addict is the exact opposite of an extreme sports athlete. I think people who use drugs, especially like heroin particularly, are trying to disconnect from the reality in which they live.
I would agree with that.
They're experiencing pain, whether it be physical or emotional, and they do not like the reality in which they are, so they're taking this drug to detach, disconnect, try to somehow escape the suffering that they're going through, right? They're looking for a way out. Or even most psychedelics, they're trying to change their perception of reality, change what's going on inside of them. They want to fix something that they feel is wrong, right? Most people who use drugs, they are trying to change their reality in some way, right? That's how I see it.
I'd say the same with alcohol too, which obviously can be classified as a drug as well.
And I do classify it as a drug. That's why I don't do it. But in any event, I see extreme activity as the opposite of that. So the way I'll describe it is this. We have developed senses for billions of years. Sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch. Not just human beings, but all living things. Any living thing that has developed senses, they've developed those senses for one purpose: to experience the reality that exists outside of themselves. Okay? That's why you have senses. So that you're not just this piece of meat trapped in a skull, right? It's your ability to interact with the reality that exists outside of yourself, right? So our goal, and I think this is the meaning of life, period. This is the point of existing. The reason we're here, the reason ants are here, flies, bugs, dolphins, everything, is to experience this, the reality, right? And I think when a person decides to do something that could potentially kill them, right? When you make a decision to do something that's so dangerous that the outcome could potentially be the end of your existence, when you make that choice, something very special happens to you. Your mind understands how crucial and how important the next few moments are. So what it does is it releases everything. It gives you all adrenaline, all endorphins, everything your body needs to operate at its absolute maximum ability, right? So all of a sudden, your senses become heightened. You see better, smell better, touch, everything. You can feel the air touching you, right? And this is you connecting to the reality that exists outside of yourself in the most pure, real, unfiltered way possible, right? And so for me, I see people who decide to do dangerous things on purpose as people trying to connect to the reality in which they live, which is the exact opposite of a person using drugs.
I like that explanation.
That's the, and I
Makes
think,
sense.
Well, and I think that's what draws people to it, and that's why a person is willing, like, because we've been doing WWL World Wingsuit League with all the best wingsuit pilots for 8 years now, before the pandemic, right? And we would ask them all, like, why do you do this? Like, what, and the number one answer is because it's fun. Like, that's the number one thing you hear people say. And I'm always like, you didn't answer the question.
It's the easiest answer, but it's the least descriptive.
Well, it's not an answer. What you're saying, lots of things, what makes it fun, right? You're describing a feeling, a sensation. Why is it giving you that feeling and that sensation? What about this? Like, why are you willing to potentially sacrifice your life for this? There are a lot of things in life that are fun that won't kill you, right? So what is it about this thing, right? What is it about this experience that you're willing to literally sacrifice your life for? And I think a lot of people don't think in those kind of terms. They're fine with it being fun. They don't need an explanation for why, so they're just cool with answering it like that. But you can tell there's something more, right? There's something deeper. If there wasn't something deeper, then you wouldn't be doing this. It's not worth dying for. Nothing is worth dying for, right? So what is it? And I think that for me anyways, that's why I continue, right? Because I am trying to experience reality in the most pure form possible. And this gives me the ability to do that. There are many cultures, like they call it the now. They call it flow state. They call it time distortion. There's many different names for this moment, right? Yep. Where you become absolutely connected to what's happening at that exact instant, right? And that feeling of being completely connected is the point of living. Like, that's the entire point of existing, right? And it's a fascinating thing, because I think base jumping and proximity flying and those are the two things that have allowed me to almost cheat myself to that spot instantly, right? Buddhist monks will sit in a temple for 60 years just meditating, trying to get to that moment, and some of them never do, And all of a sudden, here you are standing on the edge of a 5,000-foot cliff, and boom, you are there. Yesterday means nothing. Tomorrow doesn't matter. The only thing that exists is the next couple seconds. And and you can't fake it. There's no pretending it. Like, you can put on VR goggles all you want and maybe get a little woozy, but you're not getting there,
But I do like the VR goggles where people are they're on the balancing beam and they jump off and like head into TVs and like.
Yeah, that's funny.
So totally aside, but I it's one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube.
Watching new people wear VR, like when a person has worn VR goggles and you put them on for the first time. They
fucking sprint into a wall because they think the zombie is real chasing them.
I got it. It is fun to watch. And even when it's not that, even when it's just they're like even watching a base jump or something, right? They're at heights and you just see them like. And you're just like, really, dude? You're fine. You're on the ground. But it's fascinating to witness. It is. But again, you know what I've noticed? This comes into this kind of concept of desensitization, right? I think a lot of the reasons why you're capable of doing what you've done throughout your life is because you went through training that helped desensitize you, and basically prepare you for doing what you do. Like when it
was incremental stress introduction that led to I don't like the word inoculation because I don't know if you can totally inoculate, but it provides coping mechanisms and exposure to it.
Yep.
And people, I don't think they understand is, so the basic pipeline is 6 months, but then you're learning throughout your career and continuing to go to courses, and they don't give you a bolus up front. Mm-hmm. It's layer after layer after layer after layer after layer, which can become quite a bit over time. And it does help. And it has application well outside of the military sphere.
It's because it goes into life.
Yeah.
But again, I use the word desensitization. And the reason why I use desensitization is because I think, a lot of people use that word in almost a negative sense. Like they're all the desensitization of America, right?
Yeah.
That's a very common thing that you'll hear. But do you remember when The Exorcist came out? It was in the 70s.
I was born in the 70s, so no, but I know the movie.
Did you ever watch footage of like the phenomenon that occurred when that movie came out?
No.
Dude, people were losing their minds. I mean, literally people
About what?
The demonic possession. They were passing out in movie theaters. People were having to be carried out on stretchers. I mean, it was crazy.
Are you serious?
Oh, super serious. People lost their minds. And what happened is, basically what that says to me is people were a bunch of pussies.
I was going to say there's some bitch-ass bitches
I mean, that's the point, right? You've got a bunch of people who are terrified of special effects, bad storytelling, and some horrible makeup, right? If you were to have launched that movie right now, people would laugh.
Yeah.
Like it would be like a joke, right? Because people have become so understanding of movies and makeup, and they become desensitized to it, which a lot of people say it like it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. What do you prefer? A person who's so terrified of a movie they pass out, or a person who watches and goes, the special effects really aren't that great?
I'll take that person, but then I need them to take another step and actually challenge themselves in real life so they can desensitize themselves to the normal stressors of life that absolutely fucking crush some people.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of where I'm going with this kind of idea. So base jumping, for instance, you don't just start doing a double reverse flip through the center of your Eiffel Tower.
I mean, some people do.
You die.
100%. I'm not saying they lived.
Yeah. You die if that's what you do, but that's the point, right? You don't start there. You start with a tandem skydive.
Yeah.
Right. And for most people, when you're starting out, a tandem skydive takes your fear level about as high as it can go.
If not past the threshold for most.
If they hadn't done anything else. Like if you've been in the military and seen real shit, probably not as bad. But
you'd be surprised. I've taken some military guys for their first tandems, and let me just say, they lost their collective fucking marbles.
But you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Right? That's the point of it, right? It's a tandem is supposed to take you to the edge. And then, you go through your AFF course, and their first jump is super scary, then your second jump, and you kind of have this bell curve, right? Where it gets scary, takes you a point, and then all of a sudden starts tapering off. You start learning, and actually, it eventually becomes fun, right? It becomes something you just do with your buddies. We do it on a weekend. I mean, my heart rate doesn't change when I skydive now.
Skydiving, it really doesn't. Yeah.
No, skydiving, you can get to a point in skydiving where it's like
you get through like your first malfunction, maybe your second. You realize the gear is going to work. You're like, this is going to be okay.
Yeah, and you can get there with skydiving. Yeah. I see skydiving on par with like riding a motorcycle. I think they're pretty similar in danger. Pretty similar in fatality rates based on ratios. Mm-hmm. Same thing with injuries. They're very similar in their risk factor. Base jumping is different.
Different story. Yeah.
I would say base jumping, it never gets better. Like, I mean, unless a person becomes totally delusional about what they're doing, which I've seen. I've seen a few people who get kind of, in a place where it's all sunshine and rainbows and they can't get hurt. And as long as they follow these very specific things, they'll be fine. And you'll see people get to a point where they're almost too comfortable. Where you're like, you really shouldn't be this comfortable doing what you're doing. Like, this is not that safe, and you really do need to take it more seriously. And that's where I'm recently becoming, because, I hate to say this, but I see myself in these people, right?
Your earlier self?
Yes.
Or your current self?
No, my earlier self. So when I started, I was the rusher, right? I wanted to learn how to, I didn't even want to skydive. I just wanted to base jump. I had skydiving.
You were an early adopter of people in this modern era.
Oh, yeah, of just being a complete lunatic dumbass. And I was stupid, and I did, the bare minimum, like what's the minimum amount of jumps I have to do? I did 150 skydives, and then I went through a base jumping course. At least I went through a course with Apex Base, and I went through their course, and then
you were up at the bridge in NorCal, weren't you?
Actually, yeah, my first jumps were out of a hot air balloon. Because that was the only way that you could legally do a course. So my first jumps were out of a hot air balloon, and then I was on my own. And my very first real jump was Auburn Bridge in complete pitch blackness during a new moon at 2 a.m. By myself. I had my buddy who was just driving for me. And I write that in my book.
Yeah,
that's in the chapter.
super safe.
Oh,
Another bridge that fucking Rigby heroed and just went off the back of a goddamn vehicle on.
That's right.
It's like base jumping is illegal until you write us a check this big, and then, yes, you can stand on the back of a car and we'll launch it.
That's what's great about movies. And now that's the difference between my life, right? So I started out as like this kind of...
Oh, you were a bandit motherfucker.
Super bandit. I love that kind of jumping. I love jumping without permission. I love that like gray area where the law, is it legal? And I enjoyed that.
The answer was no. It was fucking no.
Honestly,
there's a reason hotel room windows don't open all the way, Jeb.
Yeah, I know. Let's put it this way: I've been arrested in 4 countries, and the worst I ever got was a $16 fine for mischief. So I got a $2 fine for obstruction of traffic in South Africa. And then everyone
$2.
$2.
Okay.
Well, it was like, I think it was like 30 African rand or something, but
Yeah.
South African rand, but it was like equal $2 at the time. So yeah, was it illegal?
Yes. Yes, it was.
well, again, I mean, I did diverse with this in the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
And they arrested me. And they took me in, and we kind of talked for like a couple hours, and they couldn't charge me with anything.
Yeah, because you went the correct way. You just owned it, and they realized what exactly in the criminal statute are they going to charge you with?
Yeah, nothing. That was what I loved. I loved that. Like, I loved finding out what the laws actually were, and then not breaking any of them.
Then there's Vegas, where you're a felon.
It wasn't when I did it.
I know.
So
maybe that's the reason they changed the law, Jeb.
Well, they changed the law 20 years later, so it couldn't have been just me. Now, could it have? But
well,
actually, we kind of know who it was.
We do, actually. But let's just say it was definitely illegal when you tried to do the Empire State Building.
No, actually, that wasn't either.
Shut the fuck up.
No, it wasn't. That's what was so funny is actually when I went for Empire.
How much can you talk about that? Or are you still tied?
I can't talk about it at all. But I will say this. At the time that I went for it, it was 100% legal.
Okay.
I didn't get arrested for base jumping because I didn't actually even jump. It was reckless endangerment based on something else. So,
didn't they? You were on the other side. Didn't you get cuffed to the rail, which is actually far more dangerous than them just letting you do the jump? Allegedly, people can Google it.
You can Google it and see pictures and video, and it wasn't my crowning achievement. That's for sure. I will say this. I'll say this. I was wrong. I shouldn't have been doing what I did. I was testing something that shouldn't have been tested. I was pushing in an area that wasn't okay. I understand now as an adult. I was a child. Like, I had a child's brain.
How old were you when you tried that?
It's like 30, I think. I was in 2006. So I was a 30-year-old kid. Like, my brain was not fully formed, and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I was wrong. And it's funny because it took a long time for me to realize how wrong I was. Because, if somebody came to my house and were like, I want to jump off your roof, and I'm like, no, and then they went for it anyways, I'd be pretty pissed off too.
I wouldn't, because I live in a single story. It's like, fucking go ahead.
Yeah, knock yourself out. But then they sue you, right? And then you're pissed.
Then I'd have a problem.
So, but that's the point, right? So they had a right to say no to me,
yeah.
and I should not have pushed then, and that was my fault, and I was wrong, and I understand that now. And since then, it's really interesting because that taught me the important lesson, right? Up until that point, I was kind of I don't know if outlaw is the right word, but I was definitely operating in a gray area that was not necessarily good for society, right? It wasn't a good social thing.
Some people are drawn to the sport or activity because of that as well, though.
Some are, but you can do it in a more, like I was doing it. It's one thing when you're jumping at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's no people around,
yeah.
You're by yourself, you're not hurting anyone, you're not causing traffic.
Yeah, the only person you're going to hurt is yourself.
Yeah, you're not impacting other people, and I'm okay with that. That's fine. I'm not even talking about that.
Yeah.
I was jumping during rush hour traffic, downtown New York. I mean, come on. Let's be real. I mean, it was not okay, and I deserved what I got. I got punished, and I deserved the punishment that I received, and I actually feel like the system was very fair with how they went about it and what they did. And I have always been very fortunate with the police. The police have always been very professional with me. They've always been very nice to me. I have never had a police officer be anything but good. And it was weird because, especially Empire, I deserved to have someone stomp on me. Like, they should have been pissed off. Like, I now looking back, that was a douchey move, and honestly, they should have been pissed, and they weren't. They were the NYPD were so nice to me that it was almost surrealistic.
Really?
It was crazy. They were so nice, and one of the cops actually who was pulling me out of the building, he's had me handcuffed, and he's walking with me, and he said, I mean, I'm not gonna say much more than this,
yeah,
but because this really isn't about Empire, this is more about just the cops and how nice they were. And he thanked me. He actually said, "Thank you so much." And I'm like, "For what? Like, what are you talking about?" And he's just like, "Dude," he didn't say dude, but he's like, "This was one of the most interesting days of work I've ever had." He's all, and I gotta say, busting you is so much more fun than busting crackheads.
I mean, I'll give it to him for sure. It was definitely an atypical day, I'm sure, on his beat.
It was so, dude, how they treated me was, again, it was surrealistic. And my little time in jail, I was in like, they put me in the tombs. I don't know if you know what those are.
No.
So if you get busted in Manhattan, they put you in these cells underneath the courthouse, and they call them the tombs. And they have like maybe, I don't know, 12 rooms the size of this that are all, cages for people. And they put everyone in one cage, right? So, and then as that cage gets full, they then fill the next cage and so on. When I got there, I think 4 of the cages were full, and they put me in one that there was, dude, imagine a room this size with 40 people in it.
Oh shit.
No, there's no, the benches are covered. People are sitting on the toilet. You're sitting, every square inch is covered by a person, right? And I was sitting on the ground, and I'm like, wow, this is really quite remarkable how like packed this place is, and everyone's in there. Whether you were sleeping on a sidewalk or you just murdered somebody, this is where you are. Everyone's in the same cell together, right? So everyone from the most gnarly dude on the planet to like the most chill, like this dude was like ordering a pizza and was riding his bike on the sidewalk, they're in here, right? And when I was sitting there, I was just kind of like, wow, this is really uncool. Like, this is not how I saw my night going. Like, this is just not how I was expecting this to happen, and I'm sitting there, and I kept my head down. I just try not to make eye contact with anyone. You just don't want to like make a scene of yourself. You just don't want people looking at you. You just want to be. And I'm sitting there, and just cockroaches are crawling on me, and I'm flicking cockroaches off. And it was, dude, the floor is covered in every
stuff,
vomit and urine, and just gross. It was gnarly. I'm like, this is third world style shit. Like, I couldn't believe. I can see they don't want people to want to be here. So they're making it purposely unpleasant. And the lights are on 24 hours a day. There's no clocks. You have no idea what time it is. You have no idea how long you've been there. So you have like this time deprivation thing. And I was sitting there for I don't know how long. And all of a sudden, a cop comes up to the bars, and he's got something in his hand. He's like, "Hey, Jeb." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Come here." I'm like, "Okay." So I walk up to the bars, and he hands something through the bars to me. And I open it, and it's the front page of, I think, the New York Post. And it said, "Jumping Jerk," and it was a photograph of me hanging off the Empire State Building. And I was just like, oh, no. So then I read the article, and as I'm reading the article, I read the part where I'm like, guys, I had a TV show on Discovery called Stunt Junkies. And I read this one part where I'm like, I just got fired. Like, they literally, the person who wrote this article just got me fired, like, right now.
Yeah.
Because they said I was doing it for the show. Which I'm like, how can you write that? Like, that's not, first, it's not true. And second off, I just got fired. Like, literally, I just got fired from my job.
It doesn't have to be true to be in the papers.
That's pretty true.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But in any event, I was like, oh, no, I just got fired. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. So, and I put it down, and other people start grabbing it and reading it and whatever. So a couple hours goes by, or who knows how long, but a period of time. And all of a sudden, 4 dudes show up who are the scariest human beings I've ever seen in my life. And one of the guys, he's like 6'7". He's like black, like dark in a way that I've never quite seen how dark. And he had white eyes. Like, he had no, like, he must have been wearing contacts to make his eyes completely white, right?
Maybe he was a ghost.
Maybe. All I know is he had dreads, and he looked like the gnarliest person I've ever seen. I've never seen anything quite like him. Like, he was scary on a level that was very real. And when they opened the door, the bench cleared. Like, everyone got off the bench. So he'd obviously been there before.
Yeah.
And him and his group of dudes all sat on the bench. They were gang members of some kind, for sure. And they looked terrifying. And I'm just sitting there, like, my head down, just like, oh, no, like, I don't want anyone looking at me, just, and he turned out the paper was sitting right next to him. So he picks it up, and he's just, like, kind of looking at it. All of a sudden, he looks at me, and then he looks back at the paper, and he keeps on reading, and then he looks at me again. And then, like, he finishes what he's reading, and he's all, "Is this you?" And I'm like, yeah. And all of a sudden, his whole, like, everything changes. And he's like, "Holy shit, you're crazy." He's all, this is the craziest person's whole goddamn self. He's like, I've been in the top Empire State Building. I almost shit my pants. He's like, what's wrong with you? Like, and he starts just going off, and I'm like, oh my God. It was bizarre. Like the kind of like, he all of a sudden became friendly, like super friendly, and everyone was like laughing, and all of a sudden the cops came up and they're like, hey Jeb, it's time to go to the DA, and I'm like oh no. So it was like the cops were being super duper nice. I got out, they asked me for autographs. It was the first time I was ever asked for an autograph was by police officers from the NYPD, and I'm just like, this is so bizarre. It was surreal, like a very surreal experience. And anyway, that was that. That's most I've ever talked about that, because I really don't like talking about it, because it wasn't my proudest moment, and it's not what I really want to be remembered for.
How are you going to get away if things had gone as planned? What was your exit?
I was never planning on getting away.
What was your plan once you hit the ground?
I was always going to get caught. But for me, I was going to jump, land, and I was going to get away right then.
Yeah.
Because I basically, you're landing in traffic, so everything's frozen. You hit. I mean, it's been jumped before. It was jumped by my buddy Yuri jumped it. Thor Alex jumped it. 2 British guys jumped it.
Probably not at rush hour.
No, rush hour.
Shit.
No, you choose rush hour. That's the point, because it causes gridlock.
Oh shit!
You
I hadn't thought about
you
it
actually
from that
don't want to
perspective.
go at any other time, because gridlock, the cars aren't moving.
Yeah.
And even when they do move, they move very slow. And the thing about New York that's really remarkable is that all the street lights are on a timer, so they all turn red at the same time. So literally everything shuts down.
You can actually set yourself up for exactly what you're looking for.
And it's
there.
5 lanes. I mean, dude, it's a huge landing area. You land between the cars. So you would just land, grab your stuff, then go on into the subway, jump on a subway, or jump in a cab. Probably not a cab, though. Rush hour would get you stuck. But like Thor Alex just went into the subway, got on a train, gone.
I've been up there. I was thinking of you when I was up there.
Yeah. Actually, I've had a few friends up there who said that, every now and then the tour guides talk about me.
I'm sure they fucking do.
Which is funny.
An atypical tour experience.
It was, and it was funny too, because I had no idea the impact that was going to have on just everything. But before that, I would get recognized here and there, but I would always be, are you the jumper guy? Or, do I know you from high school? Like, people would kind of recognize me, but they never really knew what from. After that was the first time I started getting, are you Jeb Corliss? That was when I started getting really recognized, and my name was the most Googled name on Earth for 3 days, which is weird for something like that. But it was because, I was a TV show host at the time, and it really was. And I was I had friends in Israel. I was on the front page of papers in Israel. I was on the
for all the wrong reasons.
Oh, for the worst reasons. Like, they say there's no such thing as bad publicity. Yeah, tell that to BP Oil. There is bad publicity. And that was not good publicity, and it crushed my career for a decade, and it really hurt me badly. It cost me $500,000 in legal fees and fighting and battling, and it was brutal. It was brutal, and I got punished. It was a real punishment, and but again, I deserved it. I understand what I got, and I don't. The Empire was right. New York was right. The system was right. Everyone was right. And they all just laughed at me because I was a crazy person. They're just like, you're a crazy person. You're hard to take serious because you're obviously insane. And I can't argue with them. It's like, yeah, it's true. It was a lunatic thing. But what I learned from it is I haven't done any legal base jump since. I realized that
there's so many places in the world where legality isn't an issue that it's. At this point, it's what's the risk to reward ratio? It just isn't there.
Well, and it's not just that. I started realizing I wanted to be a professional, right? And if you want to be a professional, you need to act like one. And at the end of the day, I wanted to make what I did a positive experience for everyone else, not just for me, right? I kind of got over this whole me, because I was very selfish, and it was all about me and what I wanted to do and what was good for me. And I didn't really care about what was happening for anybody else. And that day I caused traffic. I made it really difficult for people to get home that day, which was a douchey thing to do, right? These people have lives. They want to get home. They don't want to deal with me. You know what I mean? So I kind of realized that now, if I want to jump a building, well, I'll go to those building owners and we will work a deal and we'll make a movie or we'll make a show or we'll get permission.
What was once illegal can become legal.
You can if with the right production behind you and the right,
fuck yeah.
you can make any. I mean, you can jump anything. I mean, dude, I flew wingsuits over the Great Wall of China, punching targets. Right? I mean, I worked with the Chinese government, jumping in what they call China has rings of power. Right, so there's ring 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, and the further out you get, the less controlled it is. I flew in ring 1. That would be like flying over the White House. I mean, that's how big a deal where I was and what I was doing at the Great Wall of China. It was monumental what we did. Not very many people know about it because it all happened in China and they have their own like little firewall, so they saw it. No one else really did, but it was a huge deal. Like we've gotten permission to do things that are impossible.
Well, look at Transformers. They're sending it off the fucking Trump Tower for days.
The Sears Tower. They were jumping the Sears Tower, and they shut down the whole city for 6 weeks. No, dude, with it big enough. But anyway, so I realized that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do point breaks and big movies, and I wanted to again, I wanted to make it a positive experience for everyone involved. So I changed as a person, and that's what I've kind of realized. And I think that's one thing that in my book that I kind of realized while I was writing it. I've done thousands of jumps, thousands and thousands and thousands. 5 matter. Only 5 of them actually made me grow as a human being. And that's what I started realizing as I was writing is it's like I didn't write about the fun jumps. That's not what I talked about.
Yeah.
The fun didn't matter. I didn't learn anything from having fun. Throughout my life, I've had a lot of fun, but I don't learn from that. I learned from the pain. I learned from the suffering. I learned from the hardship. Right? I learned from making mistakes, doing things wrong, and getting shattered because of it, both physically, financially, emotionally. You pick it, right? And each time I got shattered and broken is when I was able to actually learn something that mattered in my life. And when I was young, I didn't used to talk about this much until I did a documentary. In 2003, I did a documentary called Fearless, and I had an interviewer who was just really good. Like, there's just sometimes people, they talk to you and they get you to talk about stuff that you just had never talked about before. And he got me to talk about being suicidal. And I had never told anyone. Like, my mom didn't know. Nobody. I went through like this super dark period from like 7 years old until I was 19 that no one knew about. I mean, people knew I was troubled. Mm-hmm. Like, they knew things were wrong. They knew that I was violent and dangerous and scary, but they didn't know why. They didn't understand what was going on in my mind. And even I wasn't fully aware of exactly what was wrong. I still, to this day, I can't even relate to that guy, like that person. If I came across someone like I was at 10 or 12 years old, I'd be terrified of them. They are a scary person. Like, I was a scary person. And I was dangerous. And, I never talked about it. I was just kind of quiet. And this guy, he was doing an interview and he asked me these questions, and all of a sudden I just opened up and I told him the truth. I just decided, you know what? I'm older now. I'm past it. I don't need to hide from this anymore. I can talk about this, and I talked about being suicidal, and I talked about the darkness and how I didn't want to be alive anymore, and like what I went through. And it's fascinating because, when I did that kind of work back in the beginning, I didn't think people would see it. It's weird. Like, I licensed footage to make money so I could continue jumping. That's it. I would go, the show would buy footage from me. I would get that money. I would go spend it to go jumping. I never thought anyone would see that. Like, I never even thought, I'm actually going to be on TV now and people are going to see this, right? It didn't even enter my mind. I didn't even think in those terms. And many years later, all of a sudden people started recognizing me. And it was always so weird. I remember the first time I got recognized, I was like in Utah at like some gas station, and some dude came up to me and he's like, "Hey, are you like that jumper guy?" And I was like, "How would you know who I am?" And he's like, he talks about something that I did, and I'm just like, "Oh, you saw that?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, it was amazing."
They actually used that footage that I sold to them?
Yeah, you mean they weren't just giving me money? But it was funny because I hadn't thought about it, And when I did that documentary, Fearless, it was another thing I did. I didn't even think about what I was saying, right? I just was honest. I was just talking and saying honest things. And then all of a sudden, people started writing to me. And saying, "Hey, that really helped." Like, hearing about your struggle and hearing about what you went through and how you coped with it. And I started getting these emails, and I started noticing it was either like young, like teenagers going through things.
you went through, yeah.
What I went through. Or veterans. I got a lot of stuff from veterans, which was always really strange to me. Like I didn't understand like how they were connecting with it, but I would get these letters from them, and I was always like, and I didn't know. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, I would never suggest anyone, do what I did to cope with my problems. I'm glad I didn't get into drugs. I'm glad I didn't get into more destructive behavior that would hurt other people. Really, what I did was more, if it was going to hurt anyone, it was going to hurt me.
Yeah.
But it helped me. Like I did, base jumping saved my life, which is kind of funny because it's like this thing that kills people. But for me, it really did save me. And it gave me a place to kind of channel all this really dark energy because I was filled with darkness, and I needed some place to put it. And luckily, base jumping was the thing I needed. Like it was so extreme and so intense and so like encompassing. I always kind of say it like my brain was on fire, like I was burning, like my mind was literally burning. And I saw base jumping as like these little fire breaks. I would do these really horrifying things that would just short circuit my brain and kind of hold that raging inferno back. And I feel like it saved me. Like it helped me hold on. It helped me get through all of it, right?
How long was it before the fire went out? Or does it ever go out?
I don't think it ever goes out. Like it's always going to be there. I can't even describe what it even is. It's so, I think the human mind is so complicated, and we're all struggling. I don't think anyone has it figured out, I
think some of life is meant to be struggled through.
It has to. Well,
I think the pursuit of having no struggle is like a recipe for disaster.
Well, one, I think it's impossible. I don't care if you're Bill Gates' kids; they're struggling. Everyone is going through something. I mean, and this is the thing. Even if you don't go through anything, someone you care about is going to die. Like you're going to feel pain. You're going to suffer. That's just part of life. And a big thing that I kind of realized while writing my book was that I started understanding that suffering and that pain may be the most important part of life, at least for me. Like that struggle is what made me who I am. Like if I had like some genie and I could like get wishes and stuff and I could change something in my life, I wouldn't change anything. There isn't one thing that I would go back and go, oh, I want to change this. Because even my mistakes and even my pain and even my suffering, all of that helped make me the person I am today. And I'm happy with the person I am today. So I wouldn't want to change any of those things because that would change me.
Yeah.
So I can see how if a person is someplace where they don't want to be, if they're in a spot where they are still struggling and still suffering and still in pain, how they'd want to change some things. But I would suggest you can't, right? There is no going back in time and making things different. All you can do is like look at the mistake and look at the thing that happened to you and be like, I'm going to try to learn from that so that it doesn't happen again, right? And if you can do that, like if you can go through some really horrible thing and all of a sudden learn from that thing to ensure that it doesn't ever happen to you or someone you care about in the future, then that's a win, right? And if you can see it as a win, then it can change your perspective on things. Because a lot of life is perception or perspective, like how you look at it, And I think that's the only thing you have real control over. You don't have control over things that happen to you a lot of times. And there is a lot of, I don't like using the word luck, but there is a lot of luck in life. A lot of luck is involved. I've done jumps and made it, and my friends have done the exact same jump and not made it. We didn't do anything different, and that's where I've kind of really come to realize that I'm a very fortunate person. I've been very, very lucky throughout my life, and I think I've had way more luck than I have skill. Like I've always been a competent base jumper and a pretty okay base jumper because I did train really hard, but I've never been the best. There's always been people better than me, and they're all dead. Every single time I meet someone, I'm like, wow, this guy's really good. Like, he is so much better than me. He dies. And you just sit back and go, I don't ever want someone thinking I'm the best. I don't ever want that word being used to describe me in anything. And it's funny because every now and then you'll do, like, a project, and they're always like, oh, he's the best. And don't say that about me. Don't you ever say that about me. First off, it's not true. It's not accurate. There are people way better than me, and there always have been. But second, don't put that on me. I'm not a competitive person. I do not think you should compete in things that can kill you. I think that's wrong. And if you compete in something that kills you, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about, a lot of these dudes who they are competitive, and they want people to think they're the best. And it's really important for them that other people think that they're good, and that gets them very dead, very, very dead.
Yeah, because they're seeking outside validation.
Yeah.
And, like you were saying, if you fly under the tree and that gets you some validation, how the fuck do you take that to the next level?
There's no next
You
level.
skip off the ground? I mean...
Well, we said it earlier. I mean, if you're looking for the line between life and death, you're going to find it.
Yeah, every time.
Every time. And when you find it, it's because you died,
When you were younger and in, the trenches of what you described as feeling like you were suicidal and a dangerous person, before you had found base jumping and were able to do that, how were you able to survive through that without taking action?
Well, the problem is I took action. Like I from 1st to 5th grade, I was in a fight almost every single day. I didn't go to school. Like, to me, school wasn't a place to go to learn. I wasn't going there to read books and learn about math. I was going there to fight. It was a constant fight. And it was never me against one dude. It was me against like 10 dudes. Like, it was never a fair fight, ever. I'd never had a fair fight. If you look at my face, I have scars across my lip from getting hit in the face with rocks. When my head is really shaved, you can see scars across the side of my head, and that's from getting steel metal discs stuck in my skull. That we used to fight, like real fights. And by 5th grade, I had become so violent and just so filled with rage that, I don't like talking about this stuff because it sometimes people take stuff out of context and they don't fully grasp what I'm talking about. But I was on the verge of being a school shooter. Like, I was that level crazy. Like, I had completely lost the script and I hated everyone. And I just wanted people to suffer because I was in so much pain that I wanted everyone else to feel the pain that I was feeling. It's kind of like, when I saw Columbine, I remember watching it, and people were like, oh, how could this happen? It must be the video games. It must be the movies. I'm like, did you douchebags ever go to school? Did you spend any time in school at all? These kids were being tortured from 1st grade. They were being beaten on and beaten on and beaten on. And they finally snapped, And I can kind of relate because I was there. And luckily for me, I wasn't quiet about it. Like, I told people what I was going to do. And because I told people, they responded. And the school brought in psychologists. I had one really bad fight where I had like 5 kids like gang up on me and like basically beat the shit out of me. And I couldn't do anything about it because you're being beaten up by multiple people. But I snapped and I lost it completely. And the main kind of instigator, they're used to like line kids up. There's a bell that would ring, and they line up like 1st grade, 2nd grade, all the way through 6th grade. They'd all be in lines, and the teachers of each class would be in the front. And this kid I think he was 1 year ahead of me. He was in 6th grade. I was in 5th. And he was like standing next to the teacher, like, oh, he's not going to do anything to me if I'm standing next to her, right? And I walk inside and I grab like the biggest, heaviest thing I can find. And I just go straight up to him. I just crack his skull open right there. I drop him. And everyone was just terrified. Because it was so savage and so violent and just so and the look on my face and how I was, no one wanted to touch me. Because when they saw it, they were just like, and I instantly just turned around, walked into the school, went straight to the principal's office. No one told me anything. I sat down in front of the principal, and she's just like, what are you doing here? I'm like, a bunch of kids just beat me up, and I'm done. I just cracked his head open with a pencil sharpener, and the next person who touches me, I'm killing them. And she's just like, whoa, and the way I said it, and it's funny, because my whole life, whenever I've said things, no one's ever questioned that I was going to do exactly what I said I was going to do. Like, it's
delivery counts.
Well, and I wasn't threatening.
Yeah, no.
I was just saying what's happening.
There's a difference between a threat that you can kind of see your way through and a fucking delivery where there's no question that the action will be taken.
This is happening, and they realized that, and they brought in psychologists, and they started studying me, and they removed all my books, anything I could use as a weapon was taken away, and they determined, they're like, this is not a healthy environment. If it's already escalated this much by 5th grade, when he gets to high school, someone's going to get hurt. Yeah. Like, seriously hurt. Like, this is super serious, and I was then put into homeschooling. And it's remarkable because that move saved my life. and probably saved a lot of other people's lives
I was
too.
going to say probably others, yeah.
Because what it did is I was taken out of the situation. It was recognized, it was seen, I was removed. I haven't been in a fight since 5th grade. Think about that for a second. I went from being super violent, super volatile, on the verge of killing people, to docile, right? That says a lot about, recognizing a problem, because there are solutions, man. These are kids.
Yeah.
They're not monsters. They've just been tortured. And it's funny how people, they can't accept the fact that, people, our school system is broken. It's been broken for a long time. People aren't going there to learn. At least I didn't feel like that. And it's interesting because I went to homeschooling. I was homeschooled until 12th grade. And then by 12th grade, I was put into like a private school. I took the GED, got my high, and then combined with high school credits, I got my high school diploma. And then I went to college. And it's funny, by the time I got to college, I was fine. No more violence. Though I should rephrase this. I had what's the word for it? I was volatile. Like I did have like this kind of rage that was kind of smoldering inside of me. And I think that's part of where the depression and darkness and all this stuff was built into me from my childhood, like what happened to me in school and everything. And base jumping is where I finally was able to channel all of that, rage and pain and whatever. But I never, like I said, I never got in another fight ever. I had a few moments where there were like these crossroads where someone was pushing me. And if they had pushed just a little harder, I might have done something. But it never happened. Like no one ever did. And luckily for me, I through that stage, like before, because that was all before I got to base jumping, right?
Yeah.
So before I got to base jumping, I still had this like kinetic energy that was just like trying to like escape, and I had nowhere to put it, and it was very intense and very powerful. And then when I started base jumping, I finally found a place to put it, and I literally scared myself to death. Like I literally scared it out of me. Like it's impossible to describe it, but I literally, in the beginning, base jumping for me was about terror. It wasn't about flying you always talk about that, and sure, maybe a little bit, but no. For me, base jumping was about terror. It was about how much fear and horror could I take before my mind shattered. And that's what I was doing, is I was trying to shatter my mind because I needed to break it in order to rebuild it. And I was just breaking myself, psychologically, physically, mentally, and it took years to get myself to a place where I would say the violence left me by 21. Like when I started really base jumping, I was no longer violent. I also was no longer suicidal. Like that's what a lot of people, like when I tell this story, they're like, oh, well, you got to base jump because you're suicidal. And the thought of wanting to base jump was that. But by the time I actually got to base jumping, I wasn't suicidal anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't want to die. And it actually created a strange paradox for me because I started base jumping and I had built this like over a 5-year period of time, these dreams of things I wanted to do that were all death. It was all like super death shit. Like, you're just like, there's no way you're going to survive any of this, So I built these weird ass dreams of just death. And then all of a sudden I got there and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't want to die anymore. This is a situation. Like it became a problem, but it didn't stop me.
Yeah.
And that's where I created that kind of concept of like, I want to get in there, make this really difficult thing happen, and get out in the safest way possible. And unfortunately for me, I was also one of these rushers. I just everything now. And that's what got me hurt.
Yeah.
And that's why now when I talk to people, it's like I recognize them, right? Like I can see it. I'm like, you or me.
It is so, you seeing yourself like that in other people, it from a fucking mile away.
Oh, yeah. I can see it. And what's interesting, too, is I know exactly what's going to happen to them.
Yeah.
Like, I can see their future.
Oh, the script is written.
It's so clear. And it's funny, too, because I know that if I say something to them, they're not going to listen because I didn't listen either. Like,
Correct.
I know they're not going to listen to me. But what's funny is I still do. I still talk to them because I've realized I'm not talking to them for them because I know they're not going to listen to me. I talk to them for me because when they die, like when it happens to them, I know I tried. Yeah. Like I did everything that I could do because when you see an accident coming, you're going to do everything you can to try to stop that accident.
Or you'll regret it for the rest of your life.
Or you're going to be like, oh, why didn't I say something? And I had that happen to me. Actually, It's in my book. I don't really talk about that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But the Norwegian guy, remember, he wasn't Norwegian. He's actually Italian. But we were in Norway. And actually, do I write about that in my book? No, actually, I don't.
I was going to say, I don't think you do.
No, that's right. This is another story. I did another Norwegian story. But I had it in my book originally, and got edited out. But there was a guy who everyone was sketched on. Like, everyone. I was still pretty new, and I didn't really feel like it was my place to tell people anything at that point. But everyone's like, dude, you shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be jumping. And I'm like, God, what are you guys... Who are you to say anything? I mean, he's here.
Fucking fun police.
Yeah, geez, God, chill out. You know, you guys are being so intense. And everyone was doing this, and we're hiking up, and all of a sudden, this Australian guy walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, dude, he doesn't know what size pilot chute he has." And I'm like, "Yeah, so what?" He's like, "No, that's like a problem. This guy he shouldn't be here." And I'm just like, whatever. And I just kind of blew it off. And I just kind of, all the signs were there, and I was just ignoring them. First off, I was new. I didn't know much about it. But also, I just didn't feel like I had a place to say anything, you know? I jump, and I'm looking up at this guy. It was the first time I ever watched someone die. Like, it was my first time seeing a person.
I was going to ask you how far into base jumping you were before the objective reality of death got thrown at you.
This is my second year.
Okay.
My second year, where I actually watched a person with my own eyes die. And I'm looking at him, and you know, from Chirag, it's a 3,000-foot cliff, so he's really teeny.
I've never been to Norway, but I've seen plenty of videos of it.
Yeah, it's a 3,000-foot big cliff,
Yeah.
huge fjords.
Is that the one where they, like, fucking 60 people will bomb off together?
We did that record, yeah. I
Okay.
was part of that. It was 24 weight at that time, but now there's another record that was 60, but that's further north. So
Okay.
the smaller record was there, done in like 2099, I think. But anyways, so I'm looking up at this dude, and I see him jump, and as he jumps, all of a sudden I see him like doing front flips and then like flat spinning. I'm like, wow. This guy's going hardcore for his first jump. Like,
Deep into the acrobatic
I'm like, wow,
scene.
he's going acro on his first jump. I'm like, dude, and that was my thought process. I was like, this guy's doing hardcore acrobatics on his first jump. And all of a sudden, I'm like watching, and he was jumping a skydiving rig, which is why everyone was freaking out, was because he was, jumping equipment that wasn't base specific. And all of a sudden, I see 2 parachutes come out.
Oh, boy.
As I saw 2 parachutes come out, I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like, why did he pull both parachutes? And then I see the 2 canopies kind of go around, and I see them hit a second time. And as he hits the second one, I didn't even know about the first one, but I see the second hit, and then I hear the sound from the first one. And the sound was something that's so impossible to describe, because I couldn't believe it was him. Because of the second impact, I'm like, oh, he couldn't have hit that hard. It sounded like a sonic boom. Like, I could almost feel it. Like, it was so loud that you're just like, whoa. I'm all, was that what I think it was? Was that, I mean, it literally sounded like a sonic boom. And I'm like, we start running, because obviously the guy's injured. And as I'm running over there, this guy, who's in the boat, he jumps out, and he's just like, don't waste your time. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, he's dead. Like, he's not alive. Like, what you're going to go see is not something you want to see. He's like, the rescue team's coming. They're going to go get his body, but he is not alive. There is nothing you can do. Don't go over there. And I was just like, okay, you don't even want me to try to help? He's all, there's nothing to help. Trust me. What you're going to see when you go there is not something you want to see. And I'm just like, all right. So I didn't go over, And they later that night, they brought back his helmet, and it was filled with brains. It was like filled with like stuff. And I'm just like, holy shit. They're like, yeah, his head was crushed, like gone.
People ask me, like, why do you bother wearing a helmet when you skydive or base jump? It's like, where the fuck am I going to put my GoPro, dude?
Well,
it's not to keep it's not going to save your life.
Well,
clearly.
It's also for like landing, right? So
for less of a ballistic
exactly.
impact.
So there's levels of injuries, right? So you could have a good opening and come in for landing and then fall and hit your head on a rock.
That would help.
And it will help you for that. So it'll help you for the more mild accidents, because base jumping isn't just you live, you die. There's a huge gray area of like multitudinous injuries, which I've learned about. I've been hurt a lot.
You have pushed the boundaries of your body for sure.
I have broken myself a lot. And that comes from this concept of, I pushed at 110% of my capabilities. Like, if you really want to do this long term, then you do 70% of what you can do, right? You kind of, what you're capable of, which takes time to even learn. Like, it takes you a while just to even learn what you're capable of. But then you kind of have this like, okay, this is what I can do. And if you want to live long term or give yourself the best chance, I guess that's always the best way of saying it, because even if you do everything right, you can still die. But if you just operate around 70% of your capabilities, then you have a better chance of having a long-term survival in this sport, right?
For sure.
My problem was I was doing 110. So if I was capable of this, I would always do a little bit more than what I was capable of doing. And that's what got me hurt all the time, was because I was always pushing beyond my abilities. And I knew it too. Like I did jumps where I stood at the exit point and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get low. I'm going to deploy over that boulder field and break both my legs. All right, see ya. And I'd just jump off and I'd do it, you know? And I mean, I did jumps, like, I'll be honest with you, flying dagger, I jumped out of the helicopter knowing I was going to die. Like, I knew. I'm like, there's no way I can do this. Like, I did not get the training. I am not prepared. I should not be jumping out of this helicopter. I will die if I do. And I jumped out. And it's a very...
But yet here you are.
I didn't die.
Yeah.
You know, but again, and I'm
Unless
always...
you're a ghost.
That's...
But we've discussed this.
It's probably...
Probably sleep paralysis, but I don't think I'm asleep.
But I think what it is I also have difficulty knowing when it's my thought process, like just dealing with fear, or when it's real also. Like this idea of, like, you know, when I did Flying Dagger, you know, I was supposed to have 5 days.
Describe what it is first.
Okay, so Flying Dagger, I did a massive live show in China where I flew through a mountain. And it was such a phenomenon that Red Bull China wanted me to do another project. The Heaven's Gate project was viewed by almost 300 million people live, which is astronomical numbers. It got picked up by every single CCTV channel in China and showed live because I had a mistake and everyone thought I died on television live. And because of that, it went from being a live show to being news. And it became news, and then it went just across everything, all platforms, everything throughout Asia. And it was such a phenomenon that, you know, Red Bull China were like, you know, hey, we do, you know, they call it football, but soccer. Mm-hmm. We do soccer, which is the biggest there is, and your numbers crushed every soccer event we've ever done. Which
soccer fucking sucks.
Well,
sorry for soccer fans. I'm just not into it. For you guys, it's great. I'm just not into that shit.
All I know is it gets a lot of people watch it, and people seem to like it in other countries. We don't seem to care about it here much, but other people seem to like it. But the point is you know,
astronomical
viewership. And what was funny is, you know, Red Bull China, when we started the project, I was an unknown athlete doing a sport that they didn't even have a word for. They had to create a Chinese word for wingsuits because it didn't exist at the time. So that's how I was an unknown American doing a project in China of a sport that no one had heard of. So they didn't expect anyone to watch this thing. So when they got the numbers that they did, they were shocked. Like, it was a shocking thing for them. So they contacted me to do another project for them. Problem was I had just been injured. So, I mean, we're getting into, like, it's a complicated story because a lot of things happen.
Yeah.
But anyways, I got really super badly injured. I was just recovering from what should have been a life-ending injury.
Is this when you fucked yourself up at Table Rock?
Yeah, it's when I hit Tail Mountain at terminal velocity. I'm one of the only people in the world to have a terminal bounce, meaning I've bounced off flat, solid granite at over 120 miles an hour and didn't die.
It's a rough video to watch.
It's heavy. But anyways, I survived that, went through a bunch of surgeries, you know, and now all of a sudden, you know, Red Bull China wants me to come do this project. And I was like, no, I'm not interested. And they're like, well, you know, we just want you to come take a look. You know, we have this place that we think you might be interested in. If you'll come take a look, we'll pay you just to look.
Those are called selling statements.
It worked. I'm like, so I don't even do anything. I just show up and you'll pay me. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll fly out there.
But maybe I'll bring a rig.
No, it was just to look.
Okay.
So I didn't have a rig.
That's the safest.
I couldn't have jumped anyways. I was still recovering. So they wanted me to do it the next year.
You were shattered.
I was seriously broken. I shouldn't have been. I could barely walk. I had to learn to walk again twice. Multiple surgeries, skin grafting. It was horrible. But in any event, I went there and they show me this place. And as I look at it, I'm just like, oh man, this thing is amazing. Like, it was like a geological anomaly. I've never seen anything like it. I'm like, this is a really cool place. And I could all of a sudden my wheels start turning and I'm like, yeah, this actually could be really cool. And they're like, so can you do it? And I'm like, I can. And they're like, will you do it? And I'm like, yes.
So what exactly did they want you to do?
Well, there was this, like, it's a very unique kind of rock, I guess. It's not even really, you can't call it a cliff or a mountain. It's like a giant rock that's been broken into 3 pieces. So it looks like 3 fingers
Like
standing
the forks of the trident, perhaps?
Kind of. And this one has like a very wide opening, and then this one has a very narrow opening. And it's actually like this. It's actually crooked, but it looks like it's almost man-made because it's so perfect, and it's super narrow. At the bottom, it's like 15 feet. So when you put your hands out, there's only like 3 feet on each side, so it's super duper narrow. And then it goes up, and as it goes up at the very top, it's like 60 feet wide. And I'm like, and it was like 3 football fields long, and about 870 feet tall. Okay, so to give you an idea, when you're proximity flying, meaning when you're flying wingsuits with terrain, ordinarily you'll be on things that are thousands of feet tall, and then you'll break off at around 800 feet, go out into open altitude, with open space, and then deploy at around 500 feet. That's pretty standard, This one, you are going to be locking into proximity at 800 feet.
Meaning zero escape.
No escape. You're locking in at 800 feet, and then you're going to have to fly like 900 feet, right, before getting out on the other end to deploy a parachute. And you're deploying a parachute over a jungle. And your landing area was carved into the side of a cliff kind of a distance away. So basically, I'm like, in a perfect world, if everything went perfect, it could be done. But I'm going to need to do a lot of training. Right? I'm going to need to fly at this thing from altitude, see how deep I can get before. So there was a lot that was going to need to go into actually doing it. I'm like, I need 5 days of 5 jumps a day to like work myself into this thing to see where the safe place to enter and the safe place to exit to be able to get to my landing area and do this thing safely. And in my mind, I saw like this jungle, and I'm like, you know what? Worst case scenario, I get line twists, I'll just land in a tree. And at that point, I'd landed
No, Jeb, no.
well, at that point, I'd landed in like 10 trees, and I felt comfortable with it.
Fuck.
But it was, anyway, we'll get into that.
Trees are very pointy.
Oh, no. They can kill you. But in any event.
Fuck yeah, they can.
But that's what I was thinking in my head. That's why I said yes, right? So a year goes by. I recover. I get better. I come back to do this big project. And this time, the first one was huge. This one dwarfed it. Because now they knew what to expect. So they actually had 4 embedded news crews. Reuters was there, ABC was there, NBC was there, and CBS were there. Embedded film crews for the entire week that I was training. So these people were on site with their own trucks, satellite, live news every single day. It was wild. I mean, the amount of money they spent was mind-boggling. Because they just were like, we are going to blow this thing up. And I was like, wow, this is a lot of pressure, First day,
that's a big spotlight.
But I thought it was fine because I really thought with the practice jumps, I'd be able to figure out I could do this. I'm like, I just need to figure out where I can get into this thing, but I'll need jumps to do it. Typhoon hits China. Yeah. So the first day we get there, we're like thinking, this is going to be cool. I can start training tomorrow. Everything's going to be great. Typhoon hits. It doesn't hit us, but it hits close enough to where it screws our weather up completely. The next day it's raining. It's windy. No jumping at all.
So this is 2 days now, no jumping?
Yes.
Okay.
2 days, no jumping.
Of your 5 allotted?
Well, this is actually the first day was just us showing up.
Okay.
This was the first day I was supposed to be jumping.
So it's still eaten 1.
It's eaten 1 so far. And this is just the beginning of the typhoon. So we're like, oh no, and the weather report for the rest of the week is obviously shit.
Dog shit. Yeah.
And we're like, this isn't good, and so I'm like, well, let's go up and at least look at the trees. Because I knew there was a good chance that I would have to deploy low and I'd have to land in one of these trees. So I'm like, let's go look at the trees. I'll pick the best one, I'll pick the biggest, fluffiest one that I can land in, and it should be fine, right? We go there. I get to the place where I'd obviously punch out. I could see where I would probably open. If I got a line twist or something bad, I'm like, I'll land here. This is where I'm going to go. So I go to the trees, and instantly I'm like, oh, fuck. The trees were dead. They were just dead, broken branches inside green.
Just fucking knives.
Dude, it was like spears. Like you're going to get skewered. You land in this tree, you're getting skewered, you're going to bleed to death before anyone gets you. And I'm like looking at all of them, I'm like, I might as well be landing in molten lava. I mean, this is death. If I land here, I will die. Like, this isn't survivable. And I'm like, why didn't I look at this a year ago? Like, how could I be? I was like, I'm so stupid. Like, why didn't I walk down here if I thought this was a possibility? How dumb can you be? And I'm like, oh shit. And so now I'm like, I have to make my landing area. There's no question that that's the only place I can get. So we walk over to what the landing area is, and I have a group of like the 5 best wingsuit pilots on Earth, right? Who are going to be doing a whole show. They're going to be jumping and flying through the bigger portion. And I'm like, hey, let's go look at the landing area. And they haven't seen this landing area yet. I'd already signed off on this thing as like being fine, right? So we get over here, and it's carved in the side of a mountain. It's about 3 feet wide. It's a concrete staircase with a concrete barrier on one side and a cliff on the other. And if you miss it, you're going to slide down an 80-foot cliff to basically your death.
And you had already given this the thumbs up.
Oh yeah, this is where I'm landing.
What the fuck is wrong with you?
This is the good place. Like, this is like great. So we're standing there, and like I'm pointing it out to them. I'm like, yes, this is where we're going to be landing. And all of a sudden, like Barry, who's one of the guys with me, he's like, I haven't agreed to land here. And I'm just like, and all of a sudden, and I'm like, because I hadn't even thought about it. I'm like, this is great. And he's like, so Jeb, are you out of your goddamn mind? He's like, this is not a good landing area. He's like, you're gonna break yourself if you land here. And I'm just like, really?
Point taken.
I'm like, what? I'm like, and every single jumper is like, I'm not landing here. There's no way. And no one would do it. The only one who would land there with me is my friend Jeff. So Jeff Nebelkoff, who's no longer with us, but he was a wonderful dude, and he was my cameraman, great friend. He was like, Jeb, I'll land anywhere you land. I'm like, good on you, bro. But we were the only 2. None of the rest of them would land there. And that's what you're trying to get, right? So they're like, no, we need to find another place to land for us because we're not getting as low as you. We're flying over the top. We can go further. So let's go find us another landing area.
Yeah, like land in like a crocodile-infested lake or something. I mean, Jesus Christ, what you're describing, that would sound safer.
Dude, actually, I would rather land in a crocodile lake. But in any event, we go down, we find a road that if you fly high enough, you'd be able to get to. Yeah. So we found them a place that they felt comfortable, and they're like, okay, we can land here. And I'm all, but there's no way. I'll never get there. For me to do what I'm doing, it's impossible. Like, you can't get to where they're going. So I'm like, okay, well, that's great for you guys, but I'm still going there. So we go back, and I have them build like this. Basically, the entire staircase, we put plywood over all the stairs. So we make it so it's still a slope, but at least I'm not hitting edges, right?
Yep.
So they cover this thing with plywood, which I'm like, okay, that's great, There's this concrete bench, and Barry's like, hey, we should cover this thing up. I'm like, dude, I'm not going to hit that thing. I mean, there's so much space. Don't even worry about it. And he's just like, okay. Right?
As you left, I would have been like, hey, cover up that fucking
That's what he
bench.
did. Actually, as I left, he literally put like their extra piece of plywood, so we put them to cover it up to like take off the edge if I hit it. Well, next day, bad weather. Next day, bad weather.
So you're not getting any
Zero
training jumps.
Zero jumps.
Holy fuck.
The day before the event, it finally clears up a little bit. Kind of shitty winds, still kind of raining, but I can at least get altitude. So I'm like, dude, I got to do a couple jumps. I have to, do something. And they're just like, okay. So I go up. First jump, I fly out, get out really high. And I also need jumps because at this point, I didn't know even where to get out of the helicopter. Like, I didn't know where to line up.
Oh, yeah, your spot,
my
exit
spot.
point.
Yeah, I didn't know where to exit because, you need to pick like marker points to like figure out where you get out so that you can enter this thing at the right height, at the right altitude, at the right angles.
And what people probably don't realize is this is all done visually. What you're describing.
Well, at the time it was.
Yeah.
Not anymore it isn't, but at the time it was all done visually, at least for me.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, I'm not even going to get the jumps necessary. I mean, even if I get to jump all day today, I'm not getting the jumps necessary to be able to like even figure out how to get into this thing. And if you don't make it to it, if you get out too far back, it's all death. It's
Spear forest.
It's not just spear forest. It's like super steep cliffs and just death. Like, you can't land there. It's unlandable. There's nowhere to land. So I'm just like, so I do one jump, and I'm obviously getting out close because I don't want to get out too far away. And I'm just like, I'm too close. So it's a worthless jump. Yeah. I basically fly over the top so high that it was like pointless. And I basically land at the same landing area the other guys are going to land at because it's, I was too far. I couldn't even get down to my own landing area because I was so high. So I'm like, oh, well, that was a worthless jump. So then I do a second jump, and this time I actually get a little bit lower, but it still wasn't helpful. But this time I landed in my actual landing area. And I open, and I'm coming in to land, and guess what I hit?
You hit that bench.
I hit the bench straight on. Like, literally, if he had not put the plywood there, I would have shattered both my legs. I literally hit
Which
this
had previously been shattered, which is perfect.
Dude, I hit this thing so hard, I karate chopped them. I literally shattered them. And I hit so hard that everyone thought I'd just been, the sound was of me getting injured, right? And I'm upside down, I'm like laying there, and everyone's running to me. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. But he saved my ass. Like, I would have been broken if he hadn't, done that. So I'm just like, thanks, Barry,
Sweet jump, guys. Let's do it again.
And we're like done. And it's like, well, tomorrow's the day. That's it, And I'm just like, there's no way. There's no way. There's no way I can do this. I did not get the training at all, like zero. And this thing is fucking gnarly. And I literally looked at all the jumpers. Do any of you guys want this? I will literally give you this stunt. Which one? Who wants it? I'd prefer not doing this, And they're just like, Jeb, this is all you. No, none of us want this. Good for you.
Yeah.
And I'm just like,
bon voyage.
Dude. So the next day, it's the worst weather we've had all week. Unjumpable. You couldn't even see the top of the mountain. It was in clouds. And it's just like, oh, well, this isn't happening.
Yeah.
Like, period. And our cutoff point, I think it was like 4:30 was like they were shutting off our airspace because it was military. So at 4:30, done. Helicopters can't take off. Project's over. You're finished. If you're not in the chopper taking off at like 4:29 and like 59 seconds, then you're done.
Yeah, it's cooked.
And remember, they spent millions and millions on it. It was huge. And I'm like there with super pressure, like the craziest pressure I've ever had. And the day's kind of going and going and going. And I'm just like, and you could just feel it building and building and building. And I'm like, at least the weather's bad, There's nothing I can do. Like, this is totally out of my hands. This is like force majeure, act of God shit. There's nothing I can do about this. But I'm like, it's probably a good thing. Because if all of a sudden the weather cleared, I'm in big trouble. So it gets to be like around, I think, 4 o'clock, like maybe a little after 4. And I start seeing a little bit of clearing. And I'm like, you know what? We should just go up and just see, At least that we're trying, like at least putting forth some effort. So I go to the helicopter pilot and I'm like, hey, let's go up. And he's like, we can't get enough out. And he speaks Chinese and he's kind of like, but he's basically informing me that we can't get the altitude. So I go and get my buddy who's the interpreter, who's putting everything together. And I'm like, dude, tell him. So he basically convinces this pilot to fly us up there, even though the pilot's like, we can't get the altitude. Like, we can't get high enough. And he's like, it doesn't matter. We need to at least show that we're trying, right? So we get in the helicopter. We go up. Sure enough, we get to the top. We're in clouds. The pilot looks at me and goes, like, duh, I told you.
The international signal for dumbass.
Yeah, I told you, dumbass. We couldn't freaking get there. And I was just like, all right, well, it's done. This
But you did everything you could.
The project's over, right? So I'm like, okay, land the chopper. And I was actually feeling a bit relieved. Like, I'm like, I shouldn't be jumping here anyways. I didn't get the training. I didn't get the proper training. So we land. I go back to the little, like, we have this little tent thing. I'm like taking my gear off. And as I'm taking my gear off, Frank, who's like our main contact in China, he's kind of head of everything. He walks up to me. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, we're done. It's like, it's not 4:30. I'm like, bro, that's 20 minutes from now. This isn't clearing. We're finished. He's like, Jeb, leave your stuff on. We don't know. Anything can happen. And I'm just like, pfft, and I take my shit off. I'm like, I'm not even going to play this game. We're over. Take my stuff off. Maybe 10 minutes goes by. And all of a sudden, my friend James, his wife, walks in. And she's like, hey, Jeb, you need to come out here and take a look at this. I'm like, I'm not looking at shit. I'm done. She's like, no. You need to come outside right now. And I walk outside, and dude, it's completely clear. And I'm like, what? No way. And so I call.
This is mentally fucked
up.
Oh,
no, dude. It was the most disturbing experience I've ever had. And I call my ground crew who's at the actual landing area, who's Barry, who's the one who saved my life. And I'm like, what are the winds doing? He's like, they're zero.
Dead stick.
I'm all, dude, zero. He's like, there's no wind at all. I'm all, when did that happen? He's like, 30 seconds ago. I'm like, because it had been 15, 20 miles an hour all day. And I'm like, I'm all zero? He's like, zero. And I'm just like, and everyone's staring at me because everyone's hearing this and everyone's just like looking at me. And they're like, are you going to go? And I'm just like, fuck. And then my mom starts crying. And I'm just like, because she knows what's going on. I'm just like, and I just look at her, I'm like, Mom, you know what? I love you to death, but you can't do this right now. It's completely unacceptable. You're going to have to just suck it up because this is why I'm here. And I'm like, I'm going. And I go back in the room, put on my shit, and I start heading to the chopper, right? And as I'm heading to the chopper, it's funny because the NBC, I think it was NBC and ABC, like they had these two news crew. One was a woman, one was a man. And I'd been talking to them the whole week, and they've been seeing everything, like, you know, so they know exactly what's happening. And I come to the woman first, and she's like, hey, well, hold on, turn the camera off. They turn the camera off, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you don't have to do this. Like, you don't need to do this. Like, she's
very confidence-inspiring.
Oh no,
conversation.
she's like, what are you doing? You don't need to do this. And I'm just like, I have to. And she's just like, all right, turn the camera on. She's like, and she starts asking me questions, and I answer them, but I'm like in a hurry because like obviously we're running out of time. So I go past her, finish her little interview, go to the next one. He does the exact same thing. Turns the camera off. He tries to talk me out of it. And it was interesting. Like I've never had a news reporter do that, but they'd been watching the entire time. They knew how bad it was. I mean, it was bad, super bad. And I'm just like, I got to. This is what I'm here for. And they're just like, all right, get to the chopper. Dude, it takes off, and you can't even script this stuff. Like, this is unscriptable. We took off at 4:29. 1 minute before cutoff, right? So we're going to altitude, and I'm flying over, and at first I'm kind of like, and this is what I'd realized, like my buddy James, he figured out, he's all, Jeb, you're not going to be able to do this by sight because you didn't get the training. We don't know where for you to get out. So what he decided we were going to do is take a GPS and mark the entrance. And then he would fly out and give me a 2-to-1 glide to get to that entrance. So we wouldn't be guessing. We would know where I need to get out of chopper.
And 2-to-1's reasonable.
Yeah, that gives me the perfect to have range, right? So I'm just like, perfect. That's what we'll do. That's the only way I have a chance, right? So he's in the chopper with me. We go up, and as we're going up, we have him stop at the marker. He takes the marker point. We go up, and as we're going altitude, the whole time I'm like, you know what? And we have Barry's in the landing area with a walkie that can communicate with the chopper. And he basically, if the winds get bad, he's just supposed to say stop. If he says stop, everything's canceled. We come in and land. That's it. So if the winds got over 10 miles an hour was like the cutoff. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, he's going to call any minute. He's going to call any minute. I'm like, he's going to stop this. He's going to stop this. Like, this is going to get stopped. Like, there's no question this is getting stopped. I don't have to do this. This is not going to happen. I was just like hoping, like praying that he would call and stop this. And all of a sudden we get to altitude and we start doing the first practice run. And as we're doing the first practice run, like we're testing like where we're going to go out, make the turn in. And then, you know, James is like, okay, when I tap you the first time, that's when you get out. When I tap you the second time, that's where you step off. Okay, so we're doing the first practice run. He taps me, and I look at him like, fuck you. Well, this is way too far away. He's like, so this is where you get out of the chopper. So, he taps me a second time. I'm like, dude, are you trying to kill me? Like, there's no way. He's like, this is 2-to-1. This is where you get out. I would never have gotten out that far away.
Really?
Ever. Oh, never. Visually, I'm like, this is not. There's no way I can make it. Like, in my mind, I'm like, there's no way. And all of a sudden, I realize, oh fuck, we're doing this. Like this is happening. There's nothing stopping it. And all of a sudden I had a meltdown mentally. Like my brain just freaking was, everything in my body was saying, do not do this. Like this is absolutely insane. And I decided, I'm like, I'm not doing this. I mean, I'm wearing a full face helmet, my eyes are covered, nobody knows what's going on. The trauma that's happening inside my brain.
The nuclear explosion inside of your helmet.
I'm like, I'm not doing this. Everyone's going to have to understand. I did not get the proper training. This is stupid. I'm going to die. Like there's no question. There are so many things that can go wrong with this that there's, and I'm like, I said, I'm landing with this helicopter. And I gave up right then. I'm like, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And it's strange because it was so upsetting that I started crying. I literally started crying. And all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, I'm done. Completely. I'm never skydiving again. I'm never jumping again. I hate this. I absolutely hate this. I'm done with this. This is not how I want to live my life. This is not what I want to do. This is the most horrible thing in existence. Like there is nothing worse than this.
So we're talking full existential crisis.
Oh no, I had a meltdown. Like I was, my whole life, I was questioning existence itself. Like I'm like, I do not want to be here. Like I am not doing this. This isn't happening. And it's funny because then all of a sudden, you know, I'm going through this, realizing that I'm done completely. Like all the training, I mean, I've been training for this mentally since I was born. Like, this was my entire life. Everything was leading to this exact moment. And I'm giving up. Like, I am not doing this. And because I know I'm going to die. Like, to do this is to die. Like, that's it. My choices are I don't do this or I die, period. And I'm like, I can't do this. And all of a sudden, my brain just was like, well, Jeb, okay, so you don't. Let's just say you land in the helicopter right now. Okay, you don't die today. Maybe, you know? But who knows about tomorrow? Or 10 years from now? Or 20 years from now? Eventually, you're going to die. There's nothing that's going to stop that from happening. The only thing that's going to happen is as you're dying, whenever day it is, you're going to look back at this moment as the one time in your life where you allowed fear to completely control you and just change who you are as a human being. And you're going to regret it. You might as well just die right now. What's the point? And I'm just like, you know what? Today's as good a day to die as any other. Let's go.
How much time expired between when this
30 seconds probably.
I was going to say full existential melt.
it happened so fast that and it's funny because like it happened.
Yeah.
I cried. My face was wet with tears as I'm stepping out of the goddamn helicopter. You know, and it's funny because my buddy taps me on the shoulder first time and I step out and I'm looking down, I'm like, I'm gonna die. Like, this is too far away. Like, there's just no question. I can't make it. And when he taps me a second time, I jump off of there going, I'm too far away. Like, I'm not making this. Like, it's not happening. I'm going to die. And I remember stepping off going, I'm dead. And I look down, I'm like, no way. It's not happening. I can't get there. And then all of a sudden I start flying a little bit and I'm like, you know what? Actually,
things are looking up a touch.
I think I'm all. I think I can make it. And then all of a sudden, like I'm like really flying. I'm like, oh shit! Actually, you know what? I can fly over this thing. Like, I don't even have to go through it. I can just fly over the top. No one's gonna know, you know. And then all of a sudden, that thought went in my head. I'm like, I can just go over the top. Fuck this, you know. and then I'm like, you didn't come here to fly over the top. Just go for it. Just enter it at the beginning and see where you come out. I had no idea. You know, if I entered at the beginning of this thing, I didn't know how high I was going to be when I came out of this thing. If I was going to be able to make it to my landing area, I had no clue. So I enter this thing, and it was way gnarlier than I thought. It became too narrow instantly. Like, I thought, I can skirt the top and stay in the 60-foot section. It was instantly a 60-foot on me. And not only was it on me, but the cliff wasn't vertical. It tilted. So as I was flying, I had to side slip. So it wasn't just flying in. I was side slipping as I was flying in.
Fuck everything about this.
No. And as I get deeper into this, all of a sudden I get so close that I'm like, last time I was this close, I impacted. Like, I am literally going to impact. And as I come out the end, like, I come out of this thing and I'm like, you know, and you finally get space, but I'm like, oh shit, I'm going too fast. I can't deploy. But I couldn't slow down either. Like, I couldn't flare because I would get too far away from my landing area. So I just am like, shit, dump. And I just dumped in full flight. Dude, the opening was so hard that I felt like I'd been hit with a baseball bat and all of my cameras were ripped off my body. Everything just went, and I just watched all my cameras get ejected. They just go, and I'm like, oh. And then all of a sudden I look over and I'm like, oh shit. I grab toggles, I turn from my landing area, and I'm like, oh no, and I'm like, not gonna make it. I'm gonna freaking just slam directly, like full on Wile E. Coyote, boom, into the side and just slide down this mountain. I'm just like, and as I'm coming in, there's like the concrete barrier, and I literally lift my legs over the concrete barrier as I impact. And I impact so freaking hard, but I had a parachute over my head. So it cracked a couple ribs, which nobody knew, but I kind of cracked a couple ribs because I impacted and came back in and hit the railing. But it was like, I'm not dead, dude.
Yeah.
And everyone just screaming, and they're just jumping on me, and my mom's crying, and it was crazy. It was literally 30 minutes before that moment. It was over. It wasn't happening. We had failed. It was done. You know, I had not even 2 minutes before that, I had given up on my life. I had quit everything. I was done with everything. And there I was, having succeeded. It was one of the craziest experiences of my life, and it was disturbing. It was disturbing. It caused a very serious psychological problem after that. It took me like 6 months to kind of recover. Actually, it wasn't just that. We did that, and then we went to the next WWL event where we had someone die.
Yeah.
So and then I watched the dude die, and I had just explained to him, along with everyone else, that this was a practice run, fly everything high. We're still trying to sort out the course. You know, we want everyone's input. Do not fly this thing like you're racing. We're not racing. This is just a practice jump.
He just run out of altitude.
Dude, he went as if this was like he'd just run it 10 times. He basically on-sighted this thing like and flew like. And it was funny because I saw his first turn and he kind of washed out his first turn, and I'm like, that's it. He's grounded. Like the fact that he's flying like this on that's it. He's done. And I see him take the second turn and just straight into the mountain. And I was just like, oh, you dick. What was that? Like, and so I had just gone through the trauma of my own.
Yeah.
And then I watched this dude go in, and I'm just like, this is so not cool. Like, this is really, really, really not fun. Like, and it did. Like, after 6 months of me just being like, this is just, I was so burnt out and just so, like, destroyed, like, mentally from it. And I had just gotten over recovering from hitting Table Mountain. So it caused, like, this real issue. Like I was really not happy with the sport or anything in it, and I was just like, ugh, I don't like this, man. And I swore I'd never do another live event. I'm like, I'm done with live events. It's a
lot of pressure, man.
Dude, it's one thing to go jump with your buddies when it's good conditions, you just jump when you want and having a good time. It's another thing when it's like, oh, in 6 months from now, on Friday at 3:00, you're jumping. You know, and these are your weather windows. This is the conditions that you're going to jump in. And for some reason, whatever the maximum is, like whatever you like the like just on the edge of being safe, that's what it always is. It's always right at where it's just going to kill you, right? And you're just like, why does it always have to be like this, you know? And I was totally convinced I would never do another live show until I get the opportunity to do Great Wall of China. And I'm just like, oh, God. No. And it's funny because, you know, and then I did Great Wall of China, and same thing, both of my live jumps, I almost died on both of them. Like, it's every time. It's like these just gnarly, and it's funny because no one gets it. Like, even jumpers, like in the sport, like they see, oh, they're like, oh, that's so easy. And you're like, dude, I'm going to tell you what, you do it. And then fucking come back and tell me about how easy this shit is. You know, live events are not like anything else. They are super gnarly. Everything is always like, and it's funny because I swore after that, and here I am. I have another big live event coming. That's even the craziest, most unacceptable, insane. I mean,
back in China.
Oh no, this one is. Ugh.
You'll have to tell me off air.
Yeah, we'll I actually want to talk to you a little bit about it.
Okay.
But it's because you have a little experience in what we're doing.
Oh, you actually did text me about this. Yeah.
And it's completely unhinged, but it's funny because it will bring my life kind of full circle, and it's a great way to kind of I don't know if retire is the right word, but it's a great way to finish.
I was going to ask you, can you imagine a situation where you hang it up?
Professionally, yes. I'll probably jump till I die for fun and with friends and with my fiance and just as something, because it's not something you can, at least me, it's not something I could ever just stop. It's not like that. It's funny because I had an interview where I was in China and they asked me like, oh, you know, when are you going to stop this? You know, stop. Like, when are you going to stop this? And I was like, well, you know, if you could fly, would you give that up? I mean, honestly, do you go to a bird and say, hey, when you quit this silly flying thing? You know, it's such a powerful experience. And for me, like I said earlier, I think the reason how I keep justifying it, like how I am able to keep doing it, are multi-layered. One of the layers is I could stop base jumping right now, stop flying wingsuits. I could stop surfing, riding motorcycles, stop diving with sharks, stop doing anything dangerous. I could do that right now.
Yep.
And I'm still going to die.
100%.
And once you understand that, once you accept that reality that death is inevitable and that there's nothing you can do to prevent it from happening, it frees you in a way that's really hard to explain to a person who doesn't accept that. Once you truly, genuinely accept your own mortality and your own death, you become free. And it allows you to do the things that I do. I had a friend who died from a brain aneurysm, mid-30s, super healthy guy, no drugs, no drinking.
Just drop dead.
Just dropped dead from brain aneurysm.
Yeah.
Not doing nothing. Just brain aneurysm, done. My little sister, she has a 16-year-old friend, got her driver's license, had it for 1 week, got hit by a drunk driver, killed instantly, never did anything dangerous in her life. You know, we live in a delusion, or maybe an illusion, that we have some kind of control over when we die. We really don't. You know, and Helen Keller said something great, which is, you know, life is either a daring adventure or nothing. You know, and then for me, you know, I see life as a bunch of experiences you have until you die. That's it. It's for super simple. And I'm just trying to make those experiences as amazing as I possibly can. And base jumping and traveling the world flying has allowed me to see things from a perspective that most people don't get to have. And, you know, I can stand on top of a building, and I know that if I have a parachute and something happens, I'll live. I can survive. I can jump off this building and not die. There aren't many people who can do that. You know, if that building bursts into flames and starts burning, I will survive if I have a parachute.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something powerful. Like when we actually just went to the Freedom Tower. I was in New York last week. I was standing there, and my fiance and I are like, wow, I wish we had parachutes. You know, we could literally jump this thing. This would be an amazing jump, obviously.
You'd be back in the tombstones again, or
Yeah,
whatever the
well,
fuck.
I'm thinking more legally, right, with permission and stuff. Or if there was some kind of event, right? If let's say I had a job and I was working in a tall skyscraper building, I would have a parachute in my office, period. There wouldn't be a question. It wouldn't even be anything. If I lived in a high-rise apartment, I would have parachutes in my high-rise apartment, period. And if anything ever happened, I would survive.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful thing. And it's an interesting thing to know that you can fly. And it's strange because, you know, people are like, you know, what's it like? And it's like, well, if you've ever had a dream of flying,
It's kind of like that, but better.
that's what it's like. The only thing is, it's real,
Yeah.
you know?
Does it scare you more when you're getting ready to jump or watching your fiance jump? I was always more worried for my friends than myself. Especially the ones that I had concerns for, like we had close calls or they had a close call. I'm like, hey, man, remember when we talked about this?
Yeah.
I'll fucking do that anymore.
You know, I am it's hard to say. Like, I will say that I've had moments where I was very concerned for her. But I just have my brain works weird. I've had to develop a special way of thinking in order to do this, you know, and I've had to develop a special way of thinking in order to do this with my fiance. And the reality is it's her life. And I just have to, I'm always very clear. That's why I think I'm so, I don't know if negative is the right word, but I'm very dark and I'm very like clear. And I'm always talking to her about death. And I'm always like, you realize you don't have to do this. You know, this will most likely kill you, you know, and I've already prepared myself for her death. You have to. You know, that's just what it is, you know, and if you don't go into this preparing yourself for the death of not just yourself, but the people around you, then you're going to be very surprised when it happens.
I wouldn't describe your mentality as dark, actually, at all. I think you have one of, if not the most objective headspace and approach to base jumping that I've ever heard.
Oh, well, thank you. I let's put it this way. It works for me. And this is, I look at it like this too. Okay. Imagine you're going to get into an octagon in 6 months. Okay. And in that octagon, you know you're going to get into the ring with a big bad man who wants to rip your arm off and beat you to death with it. How are you going to prepare for that?
Pistol training.
You're going to train your ass off,
Fuck
right?
yeah, you are.
You're going to get as strong as you can. You're going to take steroids. You're going to do everything it
Fuck
takes.
yes, I am.
You're going to do everything you can to ensure that dude does not beat you to death.
Yeah.
Now, let's imagine you're pretending in your own mind that you're going to have a tea party. How are you going to prepare for that? Right? I say you take it very seriously. I treat base jumping like it's a big bad man who wants to beat me to death. And that's how I treat it. I take base jumping very seriously. It's not a joke. It's not funny. This isn't a game that we're playing. You know, when people are like, oh, is base jumping a real sport? To call base jumping a sport is to insult it. Sports are games that people play with made-up rules. Base jumping is not that. Base jumping is life and death. Period. You live, you win. You die, you lose. That's it. That's as pure as it gets. That's as real as it gets. And that is not a game. That is not a sport. That is something so much bigger than that. That anytime I hear, like I did real sports with Brian Gumbel, and like people are like making fun, oh, it's sport. I'm like, I just laugh. It's like, You do not understand
Yeah.
anything. So Michael Jordan misses a basket. Who gives a shit? So what? Now, if he missed a basket and he got hit in the head with a baseball bat afterwards, well, now we're getting somewhere.
I would actually watch basketball if that was
Oh,
the
it would
case.
be interesting.
Yeah.
But that's the point, right? I mean, I've never really found. I mean, I think mixed martial arts there's consequences, for making mistakes, and I find that fascinating.
Injury is expected for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, Michael, do you know anybody who's died?
I think there was one death.
Maybe.
I think there's
I
been
know
one.
boxing there has been death, but
I think there has. I think there's been one that I
Yeah.
know of. But again, it's not.
you don't expect to come out of it in pristine condition, though.
No, you're gonna get hurt.
Yeah.
It's like bull riding. You're
Yeah.
getting off that bull. That's a real thing. So
I worry about bull riders, people who think that that's okay.
they're hard people, man. I respect them because I've been around bulls. I've been to the running of the bulls, and I've seen what these things can do. And
Hard
dude,
pass.
and like I said, bull riders, they're getting off that bull. You might get 8 seconds, but you're coming off. So I find that very. I have a lot of respect.
For sure.
Big time respect for bull riders. I don't watch it, but I think I have respect for it. There's a lot of sports that I have respect for, and even I like basketball. They're fun little games to watch, But again, to call base jumping a sport is that's to degrade it.
It's an activity at best.
It's
A pursuit. I don't know what the exact right word would be, but
I've always thought of base jumping as a philosophy. It's an understanding of one's own mortality. It's a person who accepts death. That's it. And I think anybody who base jumps who doesn't accept death are being foolish. They are not being real with what they're doing. And anyone who's just like, oh, and they're like, I don't like the rainbow people. I find them to be dangerous because the way they talk about it, the way they present it to the world, the way they communicate about it, what they show is, I think, disingenuous and not real. And I think that's a disservice to people who are thinking about getting into it. Because like I said, I don't have anything against people doing dangerous shit. I think that's fine. Actually, I think in lots of instances, you should do dangerous shit. Most important good things are dangerous.
But you need to know what you're getting into.
But you need to go into it with your eyes open, and you need to be realistic about what you're doing, and you need to be able to accept the consequences for your actions. Don't go in there as a victim where things are being done to you. This is like what happened to me at Empire State Building was all me. What happened to me at Table Mountain, 100% me. Everything that's bad that's happened to me in my life are because of choices that I have made. Period. I am not a victim. No one's done anything to me. All my injuries, all my broken bones, all my suffering is me. And I'm the one who can do something about it. And that's what I think, this victim mentality of where people want to just blame everyone else for what's happening to them. Dude, we all go through shit. There isn't a single person on this planet. I don't care, like I said, I don't care if you're Bill Gates' kids. You're going through shit in your life. Period.
Yeah.
You know what?
It's actually a chance being Bill Gates' kids. And I know nothing about Bill Gates or his kids, but let's just say people who are extraordinarily wealthy, you might be super fucked up because people will try to prevent any level of struggle touching your life.
Well, and I think from what I've seen, because I grew up in Malibu, like later in my life.
An area notorious for poverty, I've been told.
Yes, very notorious. But no, I was around some wealthy people, and I got to see their children and what they went through, and they were some of the most fucked up people
Yeah, they're
I've
a fuck
ever
show.
met. They usually are on drugs. They're usually trying to disconnect. They're usually very unhappy. People don't treat them like human beings. Everyone's out to get something. Imagine living in a world where everyone wants something from you. Everyone.
pass.
Every single person you come in contact sees you as a dollar sign. No conversation you have doesn't go to like money, right? And even when people don't talk about it, that's all they're thinking about. Imagine being, and it's funny because you're also kind of trapped in your own little bubble, right? You have to have security around you all the time. People are constantly trying to abduct you so they can ransom you to your family. Send little pieces of your fingers off to people and shit. I mean, you're literally, if I could trade my life with the Prince of Dubai, no way would I want that guy's life. Not under any circumstance.
I would agree. The only way you could make it better is you have to go on a journey and explore the seedy underbellies of crime and then be put into prison and practice fighting and then fly back on your jet and become Batman.
Well,
That's the only way you can do that, Michael.
That's true. If you could pull that off, that would be pretty impressive. But
Do you ever think you were going to be an author?
no, I never thought I would be a writer. It was not something I was very interested in. I loved reading. Like I've always, well, not always, but in my early 20s, I started really getting into reading books, and I enjoyed reading, and I enjoyed storytelling. Like I always saw myself as a storyteller. Like it's funny, I say I've been, earning a living as a base jumper since I was 21, but that's not actually true. Like I actually have never made one penny from base jumping or skydiving. I am in the entertainment industry. I tell stories for a living, and I show footage that backs up those stories. I'm a licensing business. I license footage and then tell stories about that footage. So I'm a storyteller, and I always thought my medium was documentary film work. Like I loved doing documentaries, producing documentaries, telling these stories through, interviews and footage, doing movies. But writing wasn't something I was interested in. It's funny because my grandfather, when I was basically my entire life, he was writing his autobiography. Like he was writing his story. He did 3 campaigns during World War II.
Fuck.
Yeah, and he when he got back from the war, he went to college and he got a degree in journalism. So he was a writer, and he would write for magazines and newspapers, and he was a good writer. He really was, and he saw himself as a good writer. Like he really did. So he was always in his study, as long as I knew him, writing his autobiography, writing his life. And it was fascinating because when he was 96, my little sister went with him to the hospital. And he thought he was going in for like a routine procedure. He didn't know he was going to die. And he was on his deathbed, not knowing it. And he started talking to my little sister, and he's just like, when I get home, I'm gonna start working on that autobiography. And he died 2 hours later. And when my little sister told me the story, I was like, work on his autobiography? Hasn't he been doing that for like 50 years? We can start. Like that was a weird kind of statement. So we started going through stuff, like looking for the writing. Like, where is this? I mean, he's been writing for 50 years. There's got to be something, There's nothing. Not one page. And I kind of realized what happened to him. And my grandfather saw himself as a Hemingway. He saw himself as a very good writer. And I think what happened is he would write maybe 100 pages, and it wouldn't be good enough. And he was his own biggest critic. And I think he'd get to a certain point and be like, it's not good enough, and he'd throw it away. And then he would go and get to a point and throw it away and get to a point because it was never.
Can you imagine if he had kept all that?
Dude, I let's put it this way. When he died, there was only one book I wanted to read, and that was his. To hear what happened in World War II from his mind would have been, there's nothing else I'd want. That's the most important thing that exists. And when I came to that realization, like when that happened, I'm like, that's it. I'm gonna write an autobiography. I'm gonna do it for him. I'm gonna do it because he didn't. This was something he was working on his entire life and never did. And it was fascinating because I wasn't a writer, right? So I didn't have this high expectation that I was going to be Hemingway. I don't have like delusions of grandeur, No one just goes and does something and is epic the first time they do it, right? You don't just go into a ring and just knock everyone out. You got to learn and train and get good, And writing is the same thing. You got to write to get good at it. And it took me 3.5 years, to write. And I just wrote and wrote. And then I wrote so much that I got carpal, and then I had to take a little break, and then I started writing again, and I actually got injured from writing.
I was going to say, you fucking injure yourself at all your activities.
No matter what I do, I find a way to injure myself. But I injured myself writing. And writing was an interesting thing because I would never have done it if it wasn't for my grandfather and what happened with him. But as I started doing it, a really fascinating thing happened because I was a person that lived in 2-week increments. I never looked back on my life. I was just constantly doing stuff, and then the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, next thing. So I had 25 years of just constantly moving forward without ever looking back. And I really did live my life like I was going to die at any moment. Every day was like it was my last day. And I lived in a very specific way like that for 2 decades of just, I am going to die, so I'm going to do everything I can right now. And I'd never thought about the things that I had done. So when I started writing this book, I decided, I'm going to write this like a diary. I'm just going to go back to the beginning and just write everything I can remember up until basically now, you know? And it was a fascinating thing to do because I had never thought about the things I'd done. And all of a sudden, you know, as a writer, you're trying to explain motivation, right? When you're talking to someone, you're telling them why this is happening so that they can understand. And I kept telling story after story after story where I'm like, why did I do that? Like, why did that happen? Like, why would anyone make that choice to do that? And all of a sudden, it started dawning on me that I'm insane. Like, I am an absolutely crazy person. And it was bizarre because we joke around. Oh, you're crazy. I'm crazy. Crazy. No. I had a very serious psychological disorder that was unhinged and dangerous. And how I got through it boggles my mind. Like, as I'm writing this, I'm like, this is an unhinged crazy person. Like, the decisions that are being made and the things that I'm doing are not okay. And how I survived is miraculous. And it's funny because when I finally finished the book, my publisher read it and they were like, wow, Jeb, because they wanted me to cut it down. Like, when they heard, originally my original manuscript is 200,000 words, which is massive.
Yeah, isn't an average book like 80,000?
The average autobiography is between 65,000 and 90,000. Yeah, that's the average autobiography.
So you basically did double.
Double, yeah, and more than double. But they said before they read it, they're like, Jeb, we got to cut this in half, straight up. Like, and that was every single publisher that I were talking to, every one of them, half. Like, we're not doing anything over 100,000 words, period. Like, when it comes to autobiographies, unless you're Mark Twain, sorry, dude. You know, no one wants to read about your goddamn life that much. It's just too much. Like, there's just no one's going to want to read that. And I was like, well, how about you read it first? You know, read it, and then if you still feel that way, then I'm open to listen. But when a person just automatically puts you into a box without even reading it, and they all said the same thing, we're not reading it. And I'm like,
we're not going to read it, but you need to do it.
Exactly. And I'm just like, what? So anyways, I finally got one who was willing to read it. And they said the same thing. They're like, Jeb, dude, 100,000 words, max. They're all, but we'll read it. You know, we'll read it. And then they read it, and she came back, and she's like, I read it twice. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, I read it twice. It doesn't need to be cut in half. So actually, it just needs to be edited like a normal book. She's all, your book doesn't read like an autobiography. So your book reads like fantasy.
I would agree with that, actually.
So it's so bizarre and so hard to believe that you don't feel like you're reading a person's life. And I'm like, really? And she's like, yeah, you read as fantasy. And she's all, the only reason why it works is because there's footage, right? The footage is out there so people can actually read it and then go see it. So they know it's real. And to me, you know, it was an interesting process writing this thing because I learned a lot about myself. And I think after doing it, like after going through the experience, I think everyone should do it. Every single person, whether you're a homeless person or you've had the most interesting life on earth, you should write about your life. It helped me in a way that I could never, if no one reads this book, I got something out of it. Like, it was worth the process of doing it, even if no one ever reads it.
Probably immensely cathartic.
Oh, well, understanding that I'm a crazy person was, because, you know, that's the thing about being crazy, right? You don't know you're crazy. You know, I had no idea.
I'm the most normal person I know.
Well, this is also something I realized, too, while writing the book. Everyone's crazy.
Yeah.
I haven't met a single person who doesn't have some kind of psychological thing either happening or has happened in their life. Like, depression is not me alone, right? It's a very common thing that most people go through a form of it in their life. And if you haven't gone through it in your life, you at least know someone who has, right? And it's a very powerful experience. And for me to be able to write about it helped me understand it better. You know, and going through my life and writing about the things that happened to me. I mean, you know, I meet people and they talk about near-death experiences, right? I met this one dude, and he actually named himself Snohomish, and I'm like, I'm Snohomish. Your parents named you that? He's like, no. That's what I like to call myself. I'm like, I'm like, why? And he's like, well, I almost drowned in a river called Snohomish, and I had a near-death experience, so it had a really big, powerful moment. And I'm like, did you die? Like, did you drown? He's like, well, no, I almost drowned. I'm like, so let me get this straight. Nothing happened, and yet you changed your name to Snohomish. Okay. Like, to me, near-death experiences, if you don't die, sorry, that's not a near-death experience. It just isn't to me. I mean, unless your fucking heart stops, you have no brain activity, you're not breathing, that's not a near-death experience.
I mean, you have a unique optic with that, so
but I mean, again,
I can get it. Yeah,
it's just because I've seen it.
Yeah.
You know, one, I've experienced them, and two, and I've had both, right? I've had the Table Mountain would be a near-death experience.
For sure.
Kinda, you know? But I didn't die. I didn't lose consciousness for long. You know, I would go out and come back, but I never was like out, you know? When I got hit the waterfall and broke my back in 3 places and got eaten by animals and the rescue took 9 hours and, you know, I never lost consciousness once, right? But I should have died. It should have ended my career. I mean, I hit a waterfall after jumping off of it. I mean, it was brutal and painful and I suffered and I had to learn to walk again and I blah, 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 you know, the whole thing. But I don't even consider that a near-death experience because I didn't die.
You don't want to change your name to Waterfall?
No, I didn't change my name. I didn't change my name to Howick Falls or Butt Eaten by Crabs. No, and that to me, I just find it like funny. But it is. People go through experiences, right? And to some people, that experience defines their life, you know. But my book has hundreds of them, like, and that's what's so. If you, depending on how you define a near-death experience, for instance, I was at New York going to court, right? And I'm on my way to the courthouse, and I slip, and I fall forward, and I almost get hit by a bus doing like 60 miles an hour. I mean, it misses me by this much. I barely catch myself before it literally takes me at the head, right? I look back, and I slipped on a goddamn banana peel. I shit you, it was a banana peel. And I'm like, how ironic would that be if I got killed slipping on a goddamn banana peel? I thought that was funny. But some people would consider that a near-death experience. I don't.
You could change your name to Bus.
Or banana peel.
I'd go with Bus.
But again, you know, it's just funny because
it's perspective.
It's just over and over and over. By the time I was 16, I'd been in 9 car accidents as a passenger. I've been in cars flipping down the freeway. I've been put through windshields and dashboards.
That's statistically really high, I think.
My parents were shit drivers. I mean, shitty drivers, like bad. I mean, anyways, those are stories and go on forever. But the point is, by the time I was 16, I'd had 2 death experiences. I'd frozen and I drowned. I'd been in 9 car accidents as a passenger. I almost died from amoebic dysentery when I was 5. I mean, I got put through a dashboard of a car when I was 4. I mean, I write about that in my book too, right? Like my experience getting amoebic dysentery in New Delhi, India, and doctors telling my parents that I was going to die. Like, straight up, they're like, "There's nothing we can do. He's going to die. Like, it's too far gone.
Yeah,
you know, it's over. Just get ready." And my parents were like, "No."
Yeah.
Wrong answer. Like,
we would like a second opinion.
Yeah, we would like to talk to someone else. So they got a second opinion, and I didn't die. I survived. But I went through heavy hallucinations. I lost a third of my body weight. You know, I remember it quite well. I mean, I got sick, and I was dying, and I felt like I was dying. And after that, I knew what death was. Like, I understood that one day I would die. You know, and at 5 years old, to come to that realization is a little early, you know?
I would agree.
It's a little early, but it's funny because I've come to this thing of, like, that's the difference between an adult and a child, right? Children don't understand death. Adults do. And I think that's the shift in a person, right? When a person understands death and understands that they're going to die and understands what that means, that's when they transcend to becoming an adult. Now, there are some people who would be considered children who are adults, and there's some adults who would be considered children. You know, there are some children who don't believe in Santa Claus anymore, and there's some adults who still believe in Santa Claus.
Or that the Earth's flat.
Same thing, right? They're similar. I mean, people believing in delusional thinking that's not based on any type of scientific reality. Or just reality, period.
And unwilling to accept reason.
Yeah, and they don't listen. but again, you know, that's people want to feel comfortable, and when you don't have information, like, there are voids of information, And for me, I'm very comfortable saying I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That's just something I don't know. It's beyond my grasp. It's beyond my capability. I don't understand that. It doesn't mean that I won't try to find the answers through science and through other methods. But I mean, I can accept that I don't know something. But there are a lot of people, when they don't know something, they have to fill that void with anything. And they don't care if it's true or false. They just want to have an answer for something, So, I don't know. That's my own personal feeling. But I think that death is something that we do know. I really do. It's weird. I think there actually is a saying, which is there's only two things we know, death and taxes. Those are the only two guarantees in life.
For sure. You think you'll write a second book?
I actually have a series of 3 books I want to write.
Really?
But they're fiction. It's weird because it's a story that I've been thinking about since I was a little kid. And I have 3 very solid books that are and I always wanted to write it with somebody else. I wanted somebody else to actually do the writing, and I was more the storyteller. But now after writing this book, I'm like, you know what? I like writing. It's actually, there's something very cathartic about sitting in a room with your thoughts and laying them down, and laying thoughts down is powerful, and telling, and I love telling stories. I really enjoy talking and telling stories, and I have some stories I want to tell. I don't have another autobiography in me, obviously. I did that already.
You could always pick another nonfiction topic, though.
I could, but I really have, like I said, I have a fictional concept that I would love to do, and I don't know, it's a 10-year project. I wouldn't have it done anytime soon, but it's just something that I'm thinking about. I haven't started it, but I have it. I've been writing it in my mind for probably 30 years, so I have an idea. It's more of I won't call it Lord of the Rings, but it's kind of that kind of fantasy, real fantasy.
I wouldn't put it off too much longer, Jeb, because we don't know when we're going to die. We've discussed this at length.
That's very true. But again, also you have to live your life too. Writing is something that I do like, but it also involves sitting in a room by yourself for many hours.
Airplanes, homie.
That's true. I am on airplanes a lot. That would be good. But it's hard for me when I write, though. It's hard for me to write when there's distractions, right? So I kind of, for my writing, my process was I'd lock myself away and I'd put in earplugs so I couldn't hear anything. I needed almost sensory deprivation so I could focus. And then if a phone rang or there was anything that got my...
Fucks you up.
It pulls me out of my writing,
Yeah, I could see that.
And that's... So for me, I wish that I was able to... I'm more ADHD, so I'm very squirrel, So I have to really focus when I'm doing something. So for me, I really enjoyed writing, but it's very time consuming for me. It's not something that I would probably do more of a Stephen King style. Wake up, write for an hour, do the rest of your day.
Yep.
Wake up, write for an hour, do the rest of your day.
You should start that tomorrow.
I should.
That way you won't die before your books are done.
Well, again, that's a thing where if they happen, they happen. The autobiography was the important one.
Yeah.
Because, again, I love this idea of when you write an autobiography, it's a form of immortality, right? That is something that will exist past your life. My grandfather, had he written that autobiography, I
wish I could have read that thing, man.
Same here, because I could read his thoughts, right? Yeah. Same thing with you. If you wrote an autobiography.
It's not going to happen.
I could read your thoughts. Your kids could read your thoughts.
It would be called All the Dicks. And it would be pages after pages of me drawing dicks.
Nah, you know what? I'll tell you what, man. I can guarantee you've got a story that's worth hearing.
My story is, people hit me up all the time, and it's usually around writing a book about my military service, or that's the kind of the lens that they view it from. It's listen, I had a slightly abnormal job that I was average at, and so many people have written about it. It's what the fuck do I have to offer to that?
You know what? Every single person has their own perspective on life, right? So what you have to offer is your thoughts. It doesn't make any difference if they're similar to somebody else's. Right? So, yeah, lots of people have been in the military. Lots of people have written about it. But you are different. Or even if you don't write about the military, right? You can write about something else completely. You can write about your childhood and growing up, what got you to the military. The point is, you have a story that's worth hearing. And your children, right, would love to hear it from your perspective, your life. And I've read books. There's one called The Good Earth, right? And it's just about a farmer in China. That's it. It's about a farmer in China and what he goes through. And it's one of the goddamn most fascinating books I've ever read, right? And the reason why is because it's amazing to see what he went through. Because everyone goes through stuff. And I guarantee you've been through stuff. And your kids are one thing, right?
My kids are bored as fuck with me, for clarity.
They are.
They could give two shits about what I've done.
When they're 30, it's going to be different, right? And when they're
Yeah.
40, it'll be even more different. And when you're gone, it will be even more different.
Well, I'm never going to die. That's what the conclusion I've come to. I'm here forever.
Well, you will die, but the point is forget your kids, their kids, your grandkids, and your grandkids' kids. Because this is one thing. Like, my grandparents, I remember them because I met them. I don't remember my grandparents. My
Your great-grandparents? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember my great-grandparents. And my great-great-grandparents,
Yeah.
no clue. But if they had a book that I could read, I mean, what's the oldest book in the world? What Story of Gilgamesh, right? 5,000 years old. Right now, you can go get that book and read the thoughts of someone from 5,000 years ago. You can get inside their mind. And even though it's fiction, it doesn't matter. These are the thoughts of a human being from 5,000 years ago, and that's powerful,
Yep.
right? And this is the thing. You write your book, even if it's not a success, who cares? Doesn't matter. It exists. And in 1,000 years from now, someone could pick that up and be like, oh my God.
This guy's a fucking idiot.
Or, wow, this is fascinating, right? Like, for instance, like right now, everyone like jokes around about, oh, how dumb is it that people post pictures of what they're eating on Instagram and shit. People make fun of that. And it is. It's stupid. But imagine if we could see what people were fucking eating in ancient Egypt. Imagine there was an Instagram where you could go on and see what people were doing in
I
ancient
feel like
Egypt.
it would be disgusting.
I think it would be fucking fascinating.
Fascinating, but disgusting.
It would be gross.
How
I'm
many
sure.
forms of dates can you possibly eat? It's just like, Jesus Christ.
The point is that, you know, it may not seem that interesting now to us, but in 1,000 years from now, everyone will be fascinated by it, you know? And that's like my fiance, she got all these tapes from when she was a kid. Her family like recorded her and stuff. And we digitized it so we could see it. And it was amazing to see her as a little kid. Fascinating. Like, I watched it, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, obviously nobody else gives a shit, but for people who know her, right,
Yeah.
who care about her, that's a huge thing. Seeing her as a little kid. And this is the thing, at the time, parents are like, it's almost surprising they filmed her at all, because like, oh, we'll see her
Yeah.
tomorrow. We'll see her the day after. Who cares? But now, 30 years later, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's like invaluable.
It's probably the most priceless stuff we have.
Yeah.
If our house was burning, that's the first thing we grab. You know?
Well, fuck, man. Upload it to the cloud. What's wrong with you?
Well, we will. But I'm just
Okay.
saying.
Jesus.
Now
Dude, there's
that's-
modern solutions to these problems.
Now that technology exists. But the point is, right? But that's the idea. If your house is burning, you grab the most valuable stuff, and that's going to be your photographs. You know? The pictures of the people who matter. And that's another thing, you know, like when your family goes and your family dies and they're gone, you feel bad that you didn't spend more time with them.
Always.
You know? And that's like when my book, like I was writing and I mentioned my little sister, and the editor like sent me a message and said, you know, Jeb, you need to talk about your little sister more. Why don't you say more about her? You know, and I wrote him a message that wasn't supposed to be in the book. It was just a message to him explaining why she's not in my book, you know, and he read it and he's just like, we're putting that in the book. You know, your reason for why you don't have her in your book is powerful. And the reason is because I'm an asshole. I was a terrible person who was only interested in my own life and what I was doing. And I understand that I had to be that way because I was suffering and I was doing everything I could just not to, you know, my own mind was trying to kill me. Like I was trying to kill myself internally, and I needed to focus to not die. Like I needed to do what I could to survive myself. So I was so focused on myself, I had no space for anybody else. So I didn't really have an experience with my little sister because I was too busy dealing with my own things. And when my little sister ended up killing herself, you know, I like I said earlier, I have no regrets, but I do. And that's it. I regret that I didn't spend more time with my little sister, that I didn't have a relationship with her, that she killed herself and I wasn't there. And that is something that, you know, you realize only after you go through it, how important it is to be nice to the people you care about and spend time with the people that matter in your life. And you know who they are, you know, and we're all just so busy, you know, doing our own things, and we don't realize how important it is to spend time with these people until they're gone.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson to learn.
It's heavy. It's heavy.
Yeah.
It is. And it's, you know, and it's also, it's tough to look at yourself and realize what a douchebag you are. You know, I look back on my life and I realize, you know, my book isn't, it was weird because I'm not a hero in this book by any stretch. You know, I'm a very flawed person who makes mistakes, and I wanted to be honest about that. Like that was the one thing is as I was writing, I'm like, I just am going to write things how they are. I don't want to pretend anything. You know, I don't care if people like me or don't like me. My goal is not to get people to even be interested in me. I'm just going to write down what happened, you know, the best that I can, the best I can remember. And I realized that in this book, I'm not even a good person. I'm not a bad person either. I'm just a person. And people have flaws, you know, and we're all flawed. No one's perfect.
Agreed. Dude, we've been at it for over 3 hours. Where can people find your book?
You can find it on Amazon and Kindle. And then there's a link
Memoirs from the Edge, people.
Yeah, Memoirs from the Edge, exploring the line between life and death. And, you know, I'm excited for people to read it because I really like to hear what they think about it. You know, to me, that's super interesting because I poured so much of myself into it. And I spent so long doing it that when I hear feedback, whether it's good or bad, I mean, I like that. You know, it helps me, you know, and if it's negative, that's good too, because it helps me become better and make, you know, if I do write again, I would like to be a better writer. And you learn from critical feedback, you know?
Where else can people reach out to you and harass you with questions like, how do I become a proximity flyer with no experience?
Well, I mean, obviously I have all the social media like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all with my name, Jeb Corliss. So, and TikTok, all of it. It's all the same stuff. And that's where you can find everything.
Fuck off. Well, you do a lot of stuff in China, so stay on TikTok.
You know what? TikTok, honestly, dude, I didn't want to do TikTok. I was like so against it. And I have sponsors and they're like, why aren't you on TikTok? And I'm like,
dude, if I catch you on TikTok doing dancing, I'm going to find you and beat your ass.
No, I'm not doing dancing.
Right,
but
just fucking sitting there, just I'm gonna find you, Jeb.
You know, it's weird because I never wanted to do any social media, like none of it. I was so against all of it. I'm like, I don't want to tell people I'm taking a crap. Who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter.
Well, you don't have to post that.
Well, no, but I mean, what else am I going to post? Right? I don't have anything else going on.
Pictures of your food.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. But no, but I realized that if I wanted to make a living doing this,
you got to play the game.
You got to. You don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's actually fun to communicate with people who you wouldn't ordinarily communicate with.
For sure.
There is something fascinating about it.
Agreed. What do you want to close with, man? I'll let you close out.
Just thank you, man. I appreciate being here, and thanks for talking to me. I enjoyed it.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Thanks, man.